All right, looks like the clock has struck 4 o'clock, so if all board members could go green on your speaker, that'd be great. I'd like to call to order our June 16 regularly scheduled DPW meeting.
John, we'll need the councilman to call the order too, and I'll have to list their names because they have more than a quorum here. They have a quorum.
Is that our problem?
They gave it to me to read off. Okay, you want to call to order?
After you guys do that.
Okay, he just did,
Yep.
and then I'll go ahead, McCoy, Cohen,
Present.
Azate, Leaders,
Here.
Munger.
Here.
We're good.
Okay. So I guess this is an official meeting since you got a quorum here. Yeah, okay. Starting with the invocation. Lord, thank you for all our blessings. We come together today to do your work with your help and guidance. In doing this, look over our thoughts so they may be reasonable, logical, and beneficial to the organization. Watch over our good people, keeping us safe from outside and internal dangers. We thank you for continued help while allowing us to do your work. In your name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's like I need a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Can we make an adjustment to the regular reports? That we move the PPA Northeast Generation Project to the head of the line?
Okay, I got a motion and a second on the consent agenda. Do I get all in favor?
Aye.
And yeah, we do need to make a small adjustment to the agenda to have the MPUA people here go first. I make that motion and we have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the next item is comments from the audience, and I do have April who mentioned she wanted to say something. So if you could stand up and make your microphone green, that'd be wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so, I really was unsure if the
Can you
board.
press the green? There's a button on that. That way the people at home can hear you.
Yeah, it was flashing green, is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
So, I was unaware if the board was aware of some of the emails that have been sent over the last couple weeks. Are you guys aware of the emails?
I am.
No? You're unaware? Okay, well, that's why I printed it, because I wasn't really for sure. So,
I'm aware that they were sent. The context, no, I don't actually know the whole context of the emails.
I wasn't
Yes, I
really
do.
for sure,
I am
so
aware of
that's
the
why I brought it
emails.
for you guys, just in case. So, I believe it was 2 council meetings ago. I had several, actually it was the budget workshop, I'm sorry, the budget workshop is when I initially, was going to ask several of these questions. It ran, rather late that night. I believe we were at almost 4 hours, and so we didn't really get a lot of my questions or concerns addressed, and that night we had voted to make one council member the head of being in contact with the general manager of the Board of Public Works to get our questions and concerns answered. Initially, I had emailed Nathan Mungers, who we chose to put in charge of being in contact with the Board of Public Works to get the questions and concerns addressed. So I had emailed Nathan. If you look on the second page, there was 12 questions, and you'll notice the back of the first and then part of the second page in red were, I don't want to say answers, the responses either by Paul or Darren. And of those 12 questions, even though there was in fact red responses, there were several questions left unanswered. So 9 of my 12 questions were not even answered that I have attempted to get answered. And it wasn't to disregard or go against what we had initially proposed in making Nathan. It was the fact that my attempt to go through Nathan, I didn't want to keep having a middleman. And after receiving an email last Friday, which my response will be on the 3rd page, for whatever reason, I believe the general manager may have the impression that he doesn't have to answer to the council. And I think that as new members have come onto the board and things have been done a certain way for so long, it's become a comfort factor. Behind that email, I've taken the liberty of also putting 2 of the attachments for questions I had asked in regards to vehicle use and mileage, along with what our charter clearly states. And I've taken the liberty of highlighting several things for you guys to note. One of those things that I know I have brought up before is anytime that the Board of Public Works is to spend more than $10,000, they're actually supposed to come before council to get permission and approval for that. Let alone just to let us know what is going on, in addition to getting approval. Yet, there's 2 contracts at the very, very end of both of your packets. 2 contracts, both for over $1 million that the general manager signed this year alone, without the council's permission, consent, or even knowledge of. So I guess I am here today, coming before the board that, like Cole said, he was unaware of what specifically some of these questions were, to get the answers to some of my questions. It's been several months now that before I was on council, it was proposed that there be oversight, which was turned on, but this is exactly why there needs to be oversight. This is exactly why. And it's extremely frustrating to not only myself, but the citizens that constantly ask me questions that I'm trying to get answers for too. And I'm extremely frustrated when I can't even get back to the citizens with answers, because I'm not even getting answers. So that's why I'm here today, to attempt to have the board help me get these answers so that we can let the citizens know what's going on too. Does anybody have any questions in regards to any of my questions that I was wanting, or any questions in regards to the 2 contracts at the end, anything in the charter, anything that I've highlighted?
I mean, this is the first time I'm seeing it, so I'm,
That's why I brought these, because honestly,
Yeah.
I really didn't know if these emails were forwarded to you, and obviously with myself even being new to council, I wasn't really for sure if I should be CCing you guys, and that's exactly why I brought this today, because I do think it's important that you guys know what's going on with you guys being the board.
When these questions came out, I got a call from John Ortworth, and he talked to me about them. And then I came in and talked to Darren. And I spent, 45 minutes with you that day talking about these questions. Some of these questions are kind of redundant, but I'm willing to entertain them. I think it's they need to be asked, but I do agree that maybe there should be an email to everybody on the board. I don't disagree with that, but I think that once I heard of these questions, I did my due diligence to figure out what they were. That's
So
why
you got answers?
I talked to Darren. We talked about what the questions were, and he said that he was going to be at the council meeting, and that's why I was going to the council meeting. And I found out there was 3 of us, and I didn't want to have to put us into a quorum, so I left. Because that's.
Do you think that any of my questions are unreasonable or unjust?
I haven't been able to look them over thoroughly yet, so I would have to get back to you on that. But I'm definitely willing to look them over. I'm not against giving you direct answers for them.
Well, it's extremely frustrating to me when in my opinion, and I've been saying this a long time, the taxpayers are ultimately getting punished, and I'll continue to say that they're getting punished because the rates and the fees continue to go up because we need money for this, we need money for that. Yet supposedly 3 employees positions were not filled, let go, whatever, but yet the salary budget went up $17,000, and we need money for this, that, the other, yet we contribute $140,000 to HREDC, which is more than all the other people that contribute together, significantly more than all those together. And this is nothing against you guys at all. I'm coming before you guys, 1, because again, I didn't know if you guys were aware of this, but 2, because you guys took an oath just like we took an oath, and you guys are to uphold the charter just like we are. And so I'm coming before you guys, since you are the board, over the Board of Public Works, to see that the charter is upheld and to see that the city gets answers. And I just feel like it's wild to me that he's had these questions for over 4 weeks now, and I still, again, 9 of the 12 questions have not even been answered, which is extremely concerning.
And we're still working on a $3 million deficit.
We're
We're still working on a $3 million deficit. We're in the hole $3 million as the Board of Public Works.
A couple of things I'd like everybody to keep in mind is that the BPW board, us up here, have one report, and that's Darren. He reports directly to us. And questions or concerns from citizens or council members should probably come through the board. Now, I know that Mr. Munger's been assigned to be the one to funnel the main ones, and I don't have a problem with those going right to Darren, but I'd certainly like to be copied on them so I know what's going on. We should probably all be copied on them, but then, there's the risk of reply all and the possible implications of that. So I'd like to get copies or emails, having individual council members go right to Paul or right to Darren or right to Beverly or right to them. That disrupts the whole flow of the structure. And the structure is the BPW is an independent organization, reports to we board members, and that's it. So I'm not discounting your questions. They are, they do need to be answered, no question about that. I don't know if we need to get a special get-together so it can be a forum that doesn't bring up a whole lot of I thought she said him, this to that. And
But who does the board report to?
the board is elected and or assigned by the city council members.
Yeah, so the board reports to the council. The council doesn't answer to the board. And when the general manager is not answering to us, that's exactly why I'm here today.
Right, but there's no structure for him to report directly to you. It's always through the board members here. And that's just the way it is. I'm not discounting your questions. I can see where your concerns are, and they're legitimate. And they need to be looked at and responded to correctly in the framework of the board. Now, some things that you mentioned, like can't spend 10 grand without getting approval. We spend 4.5 times that much every 24 hours buying electricity. So the order of magnitude of things.
Do you realize that that's in our chart, right?
What part of it?
If I could, yeah, you're dead on, but what has been done in the past between the council and the board is an understanding that that's a protection to the city, that if someone enters into an agreement with the board, if it's over 10,000 and the council has not approved it, that's a contract that we can invalidate. And so the idea has always been that the council has general authoritative powers over the board, let the board run it, because it's gotten to where a single transformer is going to cost more than $10,000. We probably ought to consider changing the charter, but every time I've brought it up, it's kind of gotten down into the weeds. So
I think it's just become a comfort.
well, and $10,000 is just ridiculously low with the way a modern utility runs and the kind of money that they have to spend. So what's been, You're dead on.
But would I be
It's
wrong
right.
in saying that these two contracts that are over $1 million, like the mayor should be signing city contracts? Let alone the
well-
fact we knew nothing about it.
Well, what's been done in the past is let the board negotiate power contracts and supply contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And if it's a big enough one, frequently the board sends it back to the council to look at it. I'm gonna presume those two were not sent to the council. I haven't looked at them, I don't know, but I know that that's kind of been the way it was. And also, when other entities are dealing with this, if they understand what the law is in Missouri, they're gonna ask that the council sign off on it. Because what the law in Missouri is very clear, is that no contract is binding upon a city unless it has been reviewed and approved by the city council and signed off on by an appropriate officer, which is normally the mayor. Normally, you all have the mayor do it. You could actually designate the mayor pro tem or whoever you want, but that's the way it has to go. So the issue would be, if any of these contracts occur that the council were to determine they thought were inappropriate, they could disavow those contracts. Now, I'm not saying that you all should, but I'm just suggesting that the 10,000 is probably an unrealistic number in our modern day, and we either need to probably proceed with the way we've been doing it, or we need to take a look at amending the charter to deal with that issue. But you make a perfectly valid point.
Well, and this is exactly why I feel like there needs to be oversight, because of this right here. And I agree, 10,000 is extremely low, but the fact that this year alone, 2 separate different contracts for over $1 million were signed by the GM, and the mayor, let alone council, knew nothing about it, is extremely concerning.
Sure, and to your point, I think John's got a valid point that it can be disruptive if the council individually goes to different staff members, but I think, to your point, I think there's no question that this board owes a fiduciary obligation to you guys as the council. So, I think what John's trying to say is, we'll answer your questions, but please direct them to me as board president, and I'll distribute them with everybody else. Is that fair?
The agreement's already been made that Mr. Munger will send things to Darren directly, which is fine. I don't want to be the one that holds up answers. That's,
The problem is, that's what I've done, and I haven't gotten answers. So now, what should I do? You're the president, and that's why I'm having to come here, because that's the route that I took, and I'm still not getting answers.
So have you not gotten answers? What are these 12 answers I'm seeing? Are they just not the answers you want?
If you read my questions and read the answers, there's responses, but they're not answers to my questions. That's what I'm saying is, yeah, there's read responses, but they're not answers to my questions. And by no means do I feel like you guys need to go through all of this right now. I brought it so that you could, 1, see it if you were unaware of it, but 2, take it with you. By all means, take it home and read it, because I assure you that even though there's read responses, they are not answers to my questions.
Well, I appreciate the answers and the questions, because they do need asked, and I agree.
It's just overwhelming with citizens constantly messaging me about certain, or constantly messaging me about seeing Board of Public Works vehicles at places they should not be, used as personal vehicles on the taxpayer's dime. That's where it has been overwhelming, the amount of citizens that have reached out to me. Seeing them at Cardinals games, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't envy you at all, because
Don't.
I don't.
Don't.
That's the reason why I didn't run for 4th Ward city councilman. I don't want that job.
It's not a fun place to be in, but I mean, somebody's got to be the big bad wolf, and I want to be able to answer to citizens. Again, this is nothing against any of you guys up there, but again, since the route we decided to take isn't working, I need to know the proper way to get answers to my questions.
well, the one attempt at it went to Darren, and Darren let me know what was going on. So if those are directed directly to Darren, that's fine. But then also to us, so we can formulate a game plan on the best way to address the answers.
Also,
And you're right, the details of these things we don't have time to get into. This is a public comment section, but valid points, and I'll
So when
spend
can I
time digging
expect
into them.
answers?
So we have,
I don't know.
Because again,
This
he's
is-
had them for 4 weeks.
this is the first time we've actually been able to see them because we met last month, the third Monday of the month. These questions, the first time I heard of them was after the board meeting. So we haven't had a chance to actually discuss them or anything about them.
Could I make a suggestion? And I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but in regards to the questions that you don't feel like you got an answer to, would it be possible to do a follow-up, CCing the entire board in, say, look, I don't feel like this was an answer, you're not getting what my question is, because I've read through it, and I think I understand that some of the point may be that it's possible Darren didn't get exactly your point on it, other things, but maybe if you would redirect that with a CC to the entire board, just to try to see how that, let's try to figure it out first, I guess is my
So would it
point.
be fair if I sent a new email CCing you guys, and by the July 1st council meeting, does that give enough time?
I don't know if we would have to sit down and have a special board meeting
Probably.
with Paul and Darren to make sure that we believe we understand. And you'd be welcome to come too, to, if there's certain things that we don't get the point you're going
I
for.
mean, the questions are pretty straight,
Okay.
pretty
So-
black and white.
Were these questions, I went to the council meeting, but I arrived very late. So were these questions weren't addressed at the council meeting?
Well, we started, it was the budget workshop that we attempted to, it was a very, very late budget workshop, and then the following meeting, we attempted to get through some of this, but then other questions were asked by a couple councilmen and then the mayor, so we did not get through them. We started diving into the first question.
Oh, okay.
And only that one.
These were provided before that next meeting.
Okay.
So we
Yeah, I
felt like we had
received the-
answered all 12 of those questions.
Yeah, I
They're not
received
answers,
the
even though there's
question.
responses, these are not answers to my questions.
I did receive the questions and the answers that are here also, and I called Darren and we talked lengthily about it, so. I
Actually,
originally said I didn't see the emails. I didn't see all these other emails, but I did see the questions and the responses.
Well, and actually, to be accurate in what you just asked, were these asked, it was mainly the budget that was discussed by Paul the last meeting. So no, in regards to my question.
Okay.
It was mainly the budget that was discussed.
Okay,
We
I
will,
think it's fair to say we all as a group, we want to be open and transparent, and I've been on the other side, so I know what it's like to feel like you're not getting answers. And I know that's certainly not my intention. And some of your questions, I obviously wouldn't have the answer to without, going through. Have you reached out to Darren personally and tried to sit down with him, or?
We agreed to go through Munger, Councilman Munger.
Oh, okay, yeah, you did say that, sorry.
Yeah, and that's again why I'm here today, because that is the avenue I attempted to take, and then these were the responses I got, but they weren't answers to my questions.
Okay,
So instead of continuously having a middleman and saying, hey, these aren't answers to my questions, and then him diverting it to Darren, and then, that's why I'm just trying to come to you guys and say, he's been in possession of these questions for 4 weeks. It's extremely frustrating to me that I'm not getting answers, and extremely concerning. So hopefully you guys can get some answers, since you guys are to report to the council, you guys can get the answers that myself and many others would like to know.
okay.
yeah, it'll probably require a special get-together,
I would say.
and we'll go through it. I'd sure like to have a forum where you could be here and we could all do it together instead of volumes of type back and forth, because that really gets difficult to deal with. And if an answer comes back and that wasn't what you're asking, and then another comes back this way, like re-explaining what you're actually exactly looking for, back and forth like that on paper is really difficult. So I don't have a problem
I
inviting
mean, you guys
April.
just skimming over these 12 questions right here, are there any questions that you guys don't understand or think that can get misconstrued in
Yeah,
any way?
I don't think this is the form to do that right now. And I'm not putting it off or discounting your
I just
questions
feel
at
like
all.
the questions are very straightforward. I don't think they can be misconstrued in any way whatsoever.
Well, I think it was Cole that said it. We haven't really even had time as a group to even,
Well, and that's why I wanted to bring
Discuss
this
them,
in
yeah.
today, to give you guys time to, if you hadn't seen it, read it, or been aware of these questions, to take home and digest and kind of figure out which avenue you guys need to take, whether it's a special meeting or what, but nonetheless, these are answers that, this isn't, you get to pick and choose what you answer, it's we need answers to these questions. It's not an option as to whether or not they can answer.
We will call a special meeting, get that together, and
And please let me know, I'm more than happy
Yeah.
to come back or answer any emails, calls, meet in person, whatever.
okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Anybody else who hasn't signed up want to get up for public comments? If not, we will go to the modified agenda and help me out.
You can introduce Steve Stodden from
You can do
MPUA,
that.
and he can introduce who he's brought and go from there.
Okay.
Sure, thank you very much, everyone. And it's great to see so many people from city council and board both here, because I think this is a really exciting project. I think it's a really big deal, a lot of potential for Hannibal. And so we're really excited to come and talk to you today. Steve Stodden, I'm president and CEO of Missouri Public Utility Alliance. I was previously chief energy officer, and that's going to play into, as I introduced John Wren, who is now our chief energy officer. He's been with us for about 2 weeks. And so he took over my former position when I became president and CEO. And so John will be in charge of projects as we move forward. He is not going to be discussing a lot of it here tonight because he's been with us 2 weeks. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to have to put him on the spot to try and figure out what this project looks like, because it's been, Darren, a year in the making so far that we've probably been working on looking at this option.
Yes.
And so it's hard to learn a year in 2 weeks. Rebecca Atkins is here also. She's our chief markets officer. So she's going to come up today and talk to you some about the markets and the energy markets and why this is such an important element in trying to manage your risk with the energy markets. And then Doug Healy's here also. He's our general counsel and chief legal officer for Missouri Public Utility Alliance. So for all the legal questions that may come up, Doug is a great resource. Look through that. We've been working diligently on a power purchase agreement, and so there's some fairly final drafts being floated around. So we'll be happy to talk about those in the future too as it moves forward. But we thought we'd talk tonight about the Northeast Generation Project is what we call it. But first I thought we'd hit a little bit on what is MPUA. So if we can go to the next slide, there we go. So I think there's sometimes questions about who is MPUA. So MPUA essentially is a reflection of all of our members. We're here to serve our members. So we bring together 120 hometown utilities, so basically communities across the state. What we try and do with those communities is figure out ways to give you the most advantage in your business as we can. And so one of the disadvantages of municipal utilities, they tend to be smaller. Investor-owned utilities have scale that municipal utilities don't have. And so as the joint action agency, so we're a state authorized joint action agency for the municipal utilities, and we're a government entity. As that, in that role, we're here to serve our different members and try and aggregate together your needs. So instead of Hannibal going out and trying to get power supply or trying to do a project themselves, we now have several members and our power pools going together, which means you can put in bigger projects. Anytime you're putting in bigger projects, you get economies of scale and they're cheaper. So generally, that's one of the things that we try and do to bring value back to our members, is figure out ways that we can do benefits to you with economies of scale for energy supply. We're training, we're advocacy in state and federal arenas, technical support. But, I want to reiterate a couple things. We are not a for-profit entity, so we need to cover our costs. So as you look forward to purchase power agreements, they are cost-based with administration charges, but there's not profit built into that. There's not margin built into that to cover things that aren't mission critical. It essentially is we are trying to balance reliability and cost and keep your costs as low as possible and keep your reliability really high. And so that is kind of MPUA in a nutshell. You are part of our governance. So Darren is one of our board members. So he is advocating for you in all of our board meetings And also moving forward, they would be on a group talking about how this project's gonna work and be in budget meetings with this project, approving budgets for this project as they move forward. So, essentially, we work for you. And so, as we have that discussion here, make sure that, please think about that. We'd love to answer questions as we go through. Like I said, this has been a year-long process, so we try to go back and put everything together in this meeting so that we can have a really good discussion. But if something doesn't make sense to you, you want to understand something more, want to delve into something more, please let us know. But I'm going to bring Rebecca up here to start talking through the market element, and then I'm going to come and talk to you about the project a little bit.
Good evening. So we're here talking about generation today, primarily because we had several of our members come and ask us, what could we do? How could we use the economies of scale of MPUA to fix this hole that a lot of our members have in their power supply portfolios going forward? So Hannibal, along with several other cities, are all kind of in this same spot asking us these questions, and so that's kind of the genesis of this proposal. On top of that, the market that you all are in, called MISO, is what I'm going to call it for short, it is also signaling that it in general is needing more capacity in this region. So even though we have some members that have enough capacity, if it's not in the right place, this market has sent the signal that, hey, you probably want generation as close to your load as you possibly can moving forward. So that's the other piece that we're looking at in this plan. As we have members that need generation moving forward, we used to have a model where we could get short-term purchases from people like Ameren or some other independent power producers out there. Those options have really become less and less moving forwards. I don't know if you've heard about all of these new large loads or hyperscalers that are coming in. If these independent power producers or folks like Ameren have excess power, they're kind of keeping it for their own loads at this point. They themselves are having to build because they don't have enough generation. So that slack, that fat that used to be there that we could get kind of some cheap purchases from is really evaporated. Buying just from the market has also become a very volatile decision, and so that's something that we're going to talk about in this as well. So where we are is building a physical hedge is the option that we're presenting today. This is putting steel in the ground so you have a long-term physical hedge that not only meets the capacity that you need, but also provides an energy hedge for whenever the electric market prices are zooming, you at least have some sort of a cap to help there. All right, go to the next one. So just in general, the way that these energy markets work is every load-serving entity, which is something that you are, has a requirement to have a specific amount of capacity. So this is steel in the ground. It could be through a purchase power agreement. It could be through generators in your backyard, something like that. But you have to show that you have a certain amount of capacity to meet your peak, plus a reserve margin. So that's the goal that we are trying to hit for you all, but also all of our members. This is something that has been increasing also in the past. So we used to have members that had plenty of capacity, but now actually that reserve margin has been increasing, and so members are needing more capacity just because that construct has changed. MISO has what's called a planning reserve auction. So if I talk about the auction, that's what I'm talking about. It's a way for load-serving entities to say, here's how much capacity I have. If I'm short, I can buy extra. If I'm long, I can sell it in the market. So that auction is just their construct to effectuate this resource adequacy construct that they have. Okay. So here's a map of the whole MISO market that you all are a part of. As you can see, it covers most of the eastern part of Missouri. So Ameren is really the biggest player in the zone that we're in. So we sit in zone 5, which is kind of right there in the blue. It is only Missouri load, and like I said, it's pretty much a few munis. There's one co-op, and then Ameren is the big player in that zone. What's interesting about the capacity construct is it's really incentivizing your generation to be in that same zone as where your load is. And why we're seeing this is if you look at the next slide, we had some zonal separation in the market prices in in the 24-25 season, where even if you had enough capacity, but it was across the river in Illinois, and it wasn't a long-term resource that you have, I think Prairie State, you have some zonal hedges you can get, but if you're just trying to get a purchase power agreement and it's not in the right place, even if you have capacity, it doesn't have the same value as having something here because of this zonal separation that's occurring. And I recognize that this is really weedy, and if you have questions, let me know. But really, long story short is the best thing you can do moving forward long-term to avoid the risk of these ever-changing market constructs is to put something as close to where you are as possible. Okay. This year, we had some new changes in the market construct. So we call this market churn as far as the rules changing on us every year, which is increasing the volatility for all of the capacity in the market. This year, they implemented a new component to the markets called the reliability-based demand curve. And what that did is it put upward pressure on the whole market, what the prices look like. And that was on purpose, because in the past we were seeing prices in this auction that were maybe $10 a megawatt day, which is not enough to incentivize generation to come into the market, hence the shortages that we're seeing now. So that was done on purpose, but the outcome of that is now if you are short and you just need to go buy a little bit of capacity on the market, you can see the summer cleared at $666 versus a normal season, winter, spring, $33, $69. So we're seeing these really weird market clears just as an outcome of the new constructs that are coming through. These things are really hard to predict. Even days before the auction, nobody knew what it was going to look like. So as far as being a planner, having your plan be to just buy from the market is a really risky proposal. So one of the things that we like to do is when we have an idea for what sort of generation we want to put in, we want to look around and see what other folks are doing and make sure we're not totally left field. So I have up here, and I recognize this is really small, this is what Ameren's new preferred plan is for their generation build-out retirements. We really look at Ameren when we're talking to you all and everyone in Zone 5 because they are the biggest share of Zone 5's generation and the biggest share of Zone 5 load. So if they end up short, it actually impacts the whole zone. If they were for some reason long, they might have something to sell to you. But you can see from this chart that they are actually, the stuff below the green line are all of the dispatchable generation resources that they are planning on retiring over the next 20 years. And it's a lot of capacity. And 1 megawatt of the generation below the line is not equivalent to the solar and wind above the line as far as capacity accreditation is concerned. They're very different from a capacity accreditation standpoint. Ameren's looking at putting in a lot of gas simple cycle generation, which is also what we're looking at. Now theirs on scale is bigger just because their loads are also bigger. But that's pretty similar. When they get really far out, they're looking at nuclear, maybe some gas combined cycles, which is something that NPUA is also looking at maybe moving forward. That's a little bit longer time frame than what this project is, though. So what we're looking at is really in line with what they're looking at. Also of interest, Ameren has also put in the plans for some really large loads expected to come into their service territory, which means they're going to need all of this, and they may not be able to build it fast enough. So that risk that we're seeing is not going to get any better in the short term. So just putting it all together, why are we looking at this project? It's really looking at a way to hedge against the future risk. We're seeing a lot of this volatility. We know the best way to avoid it is to do something local. We do recognize that building generation is expensive upfront, and it is a long-term commitment. So we don't want to gloss over that. That is something that is very true. It is, however, one way to avoid that risk that we're seeing in these volatile markets and over the long term. We think, and a lot of other cities agree that it's probably a good plan to move forward here. It's, as Steve would say, taking control of your own destiny, right? It might be a little bit higher cost, but it's a known cost. A lot of the cost of this project is in the construction and the debt service. Moving forwards, as we see the other options increase in price, you will have kind of locked in, so to speak, on what that cost is. When we're looking at the cost of this, we're looking really at those upfront costs. This is a resource that will run, and like I mentioned earlier, kind of put a cap on what those escalating energy prices could be when we see gas prices go really high. This is going to be dual fuel, so we can switch to diesel and avoid those really high natural gas prices. When we're seeing other weird stuff, short-term blips in the market, we can turn these on. They're pretty fast, help avoid those spikes. So there is some energy benefit to that as well. We aren't banking on that in any of our calculations, but that will be gravy, so to speak, once the unit gets online and we're able to generate some margin on that price. And from there, I am going to take next.
Thank you. And you know, a lot of this is just somewhat controlling your own destiny as you move forward. What we hear from our members largely is that they really struggle when you have these price spikes that have an impact, and you're having to change rates, and the next year that may go down, and then you're having to deal with that. What this gives you, it gives you that price stability, and I will say, a generation, it never gets cheaper to build. If it seems expensive today, in 5 or 10 years, it's going to look like probably the best decision you've ever made, and it never gets cheaper. And so, it's always, every time you think about generation, you have to think of it from that perspective. And it seems like, boy, it's expensive to put this in. Well, number one, it's locked in a price. Someday it's going to be paid off. When it's paid off, it's an even better deal because then you don't have the debt service on it, and it's never going to get cheaper than it is today. But talk a little bit about the project. So the Northeast project actually sits across 2 different member cities. So it's in Fulton and in Hannibal. And so when you join the Northeast project, you're actually getting a share of both those sites. And the reason we do that is all for shaft risk and diversity. You have different gas sources, you have different interconnection points, you have different units that they're operating, and so if the next URI comes through and for some reason one of the units doesn't start, well, now you're not impacted as much as if that was your only unit. Now you have a percentage of that unit, but you have a percentage of other ones that started. So it is completely a shaft risk diversity play. It's by putting those in 2 of our member cities. And both those member cities were very instrumental in getting this project moving early on. They both came to us early on after that planning reserve auction and said that, boy, we were impacted by this. What can we do to fix this moving forward? And so that was a year ago we started kind of moving down this path. We're really looking at having those in service probably late 28, beginning of 29, somewhere around there. It looks like there's probably going to be at least 3 different member cities that are participating, as well as one of our power pools. And so essentially that means somebody is helping you pay for the units that are going to be here in Hannibal. One of them, there we go. So I'll touch briefly on the Fulton gas turbine. We'll look a little bit at what this looks like. Those are Titan 130s made by a company called Solar, which is a division of Caterpillar. They're actually made in San Diego. So if you start thinking about tariffs, you don't really have a tariff issue with these because they're made in San Diego. 13 megawatts in the summer, 17 in the winter. Winter is getting tougher and tougher to get capacity in. It used to always be summer peaking is what you were worried about. Well, now with all the planning reserve margin changes and the issues with the gas supply, sometimes that winter number is as important as anything. And so the ability for these to run more output in the winter really is pretty crucial, especially because you have fuel oil. So if you can curtail the natural gas, you'll have fuel oil available. If natural gas gets real expensive, you can move over to fuel oil. The Fulton site is at their existing city generation site that's there right now. So there's already 2 existing 250,000 gallon diesel tanks there. We would need to install a natural gas lateral. These take a little bit more gas pressure. And so we'd have about, I think, 1.5 miles to install to get the gas up to that site. Fulton's already got staff on site that are trained, connects into an existing substation, which is critical that it saves us some time in putting these in, that it connects into an existing substation. It's about a $26 million direct cost. There's some financing costs on top of that. But largely in the power generation industry, you talk about dollars per kW, and that kind of equalizes all of your costs. So if you're ever talking to anybody in the generation business, they may ask you, what's that look like? It's $1,500 a kW is what those direct costs are. I'm going to flip to the next slide, that is what the location looks like. So there's the existing Fulton generation facility. The fuel oil tanks are up on the top side of that, and then the purple area down there is kind of what we have looked at for purchasing the land from them to be able to put this on. It becomes really important from an emission air permitting perspective is that we have that land purchased because we need these two to be separate entities so that you get a separate air permit and the two air permits don't interconnect together. And so that would be land we would purchase, probably give Fulton first right of refusal to buy it back someday. So in 50 or 60 years when this unit's no longer needed, they can buy the land back. I guess we can all remember that agreement's out there in 50 or 60 years. That is kind of what it looks like. So these basically, we put them inside buildings. Helps with sound. It also helps with the aesthetics a little bit. But it also really helps when it's 20 below zero outside and you're having to work on these. They run much better when they're in a building, and the people like operating much better when it's in a building. So there's a stack outside, an intake for the air to go in, a stack for flue gas to go out, and then basically the rest of it looks like a metal building. I'm going to flip to the next one. So let's talk on the Hannibal project. So Hannibal we divided into two phases, and on these the pictures you'll see here in a little bit, you'll kind of see how we divided it up. But I'm always a believer that if you're building something for today, you plan for tomorrow. And so we built it into two phases. What we're proposing right now is to move forward with phase one, which are the first two of the Solar Titan 350. So those are the biggest units that Solar makes. They're around 35 megawatts each. So for all four units, if you install both phases, 128 megawatts in the summer, 172 megawatts in the winter. Fuel oil tanks will be constructed, so essentially a tank for each gas turbine is what it will look like, but they'll all be headed together so that you share them. But for the first two, we put in two of those four tanks. Another natural gas lateral would need to be built, but there is capacity over there, and the gas pipeline is only about a mile from the site. And so that is actually a great advantage to this site, is that it's also has an existing 161 substation on the site. And so you have a substation there, gas is relatively close and available. And we actually have put in some requests already with the gas pipeline to make sure that we had gas. The two critical things are to make sure you have gas and somewhere to interconnect the electric. And both of those look like they're kind of coming together here. So it really looks like it's a project that's coming together well. A year ago when you start looking at this, you never exactly know, but it looks like it's coming together pretty well. That would be about $130 million direct cost for that piece, which is still around 1,500 kW. So this is the site out at the technology park. And so I think what we have focused on is kind of that northwest corner, the purple area up there. I think that would be the best site to locate this. The consultants, when they were originally doing the feasibility study, looked at both of those sites, but that purple site looks like it's probably a lot better from an installation standpoint. So that's kind of what we would be looking at, is acquiring that. And I know we've talked to you all some about moving through and starting on that process to acquire that property. I'm going to go to the next one, and that's just, if you didn't know where that technology park is, that's kind of a wider aerial view so you can see what that looks like. And that is what the facility would look like. So the middle area is a common area. So that middle area would be built. And then essentially phase one would be on the left side of that drawing. So you'd have the two air intakes and the two stacks and that kind of that middle T area. And then the right side would be phase two. So that wouldn't go in until even in the second phase. So it would look like about half of that. And that's a little bit more of a close-up view of what it looks like inside. So there's a lot of air compressors in there and common facilities and air handling equipment, that kind of stuff. But the actual units, these are basically jet engine aeroderivative kind of units that start up very quickly, quick start units. So they'll be online in 5 to 10 minutes so they can take advantage of market swings. Very reliable, very robust. Solar does a very good job of almost being a little bit old school in making sure that they can over-deliver and under-promise, and so they do a very good job in their construction and engineering. And so that's kind of essentially where we're at in the project. We definitely love to answer any questions. I know we're continuing to work on the PPA, and so that we can, if it's something you want to move forward with, we'd love to continue to talk to you. But like I said, we can answer any questions that you may have on the project.
So is there a technical reason why there's a difference between summer and winter?
Yes. So the air is more dense in the winter. So an interesting part of it is, I'm an engineer, so sometimes I get geeky on some of this stuff. But colder air means you have more mass that flows through that, and so they can fire the unit harder and make more output. And so we actually put evaporative coolers on these, kind of known as swamp coolers, if you've ever lived out in kind of a dry area and use that to cool your house. Essentially, that's what you use to cool the air intake. So even in the summer, the air intake going into these units, if it's 105 degrees outside, the air going into these units is probably 80, 85, probably whatever close to your wet bulb is. Because we use evaporative coolers to cool them back down to try and maximize what that output is. But they're very temperature sensitive in how much air can flow through that, how dense the air is. But it's kind of a great advantage to these over like a reciprocating unit that you may have seen before. Reciprocating units don't have that quality. I mean, if you get 3 megawatts out of them, you get 3 megawatts, whether it's cold out or whether it's hot out. Any other questions we could answer for you?
It's a cost share project between MPUA and the Board of Public Works, essentially.
We go out and get other participants, and then the other participants pick up their piece of it, so everybody has a pro ratio share of what the costs are. And so our power pool had the ability, they were a little bit, they weren't really short in their demands, but they could use a little bit of length, just for economic development purposes. Right now, it used to be, like Rebecca said, it used to be pretty easy to go out and get power generation for small periods of time. Boy, right now, you just can't get it. And so from an economic development standpoint, they've looked at it and said, we want our cities to be able to grow, and if they need to grow, we need some power supply out there. So that gives them the play to go a little bit long. The great thing about this project is that we basically took the remainder of the project and said, well, MOPEP will pick up the remainder. And so if people's piece need to move around a little bit, we can still move that around, and then MOPEP can pick up the remaining piece. We don't really have a speculative play. MPUA is not out there in the market trying to speculatively build these units in hopes that the market will bear some fruit and make some money off from them. We are just here for our members. And so when we do a project, it has to be fully subscribed to move forward. So this one, assuming that you want to move forward with your PPA, is fully subscribed using the 3 cities, Hannibal being one of those, and then the pool being the rest.
So with the cost share side of things, what's that look like? Any opportunity on revenue share?
Well, all the energy that comes back, you'll get your pro ratio share of all the energy margin. And I don't know, Rebecca, if you want to talk about that, but we don't, usually in our forecast, we don't include a lot of energy margin because we try and be conservative and we don't want to make it look like you're going to make a lot of money. But there are times that, if you're in the next Uri, that thing will be printing money during the next year. I mean, that's just the way they work. I mean, we've had units that, paid off a fair share of their original cost during the year.
So for extra or something, how much those draw in or something like that,
Or
like if we had extra that we could give, whatever, they could always try to borrow from there or whatever, make back or whatever.
I guess I don't exactly understand the question you're asking.
Like your reserve that you're not using.
Oh, well, so essentially these get bid into the market. And so if Hannibal, say, had a third of the total project, then every day that gets bid into the market, and the market picks it up, we will get back a third of the revenue that's generated off the market. These only run to make money. Being quick start units, these won't run if they're not making money. So they will only start and operate if you're making money. So when they start them and you're running it, you're making money off those, so you'll be getting back your pro ratio share of whatever that revenue is like. And that's all just based off whatever the price of the market is and natural gas. So in the summer, that tends to be more. Spring and fall is probably a little bit less. But I say that, now with us scheduling all the outages in the spring and the fall like they are with the bigger units, you might actually find out that the spring and fall is looking like a better market than the middle of the summer and the middle of the winter. And that's a great thing about these. Another thing that I should have said about these, they're very modular and they're made in America, and spare parts are all stocked in either Atlanta or the main units are stocked in Dallas. And so if, for instance, an engine would have a problem and you need to replace the engine, they can put one on a truck from Dallas and start shipping it this way, and you get a contractor here and pull the engine. When it gets here, you swap that out and send the old one back to Dallas, and they'll rebuild it, and you'll be back and running in a handful of days. We've done that at one of our energy centers, John Grodzinger Energy Center. We do the engine replacement there. It's 3 to 4 days. Some of these gas turbines, when you have to do them on site, are months and months and months. In fact, if it broke prematurely and you weren't expecting it, it's a non-scheduled outage and you had a major failure, you may be a year or better to get parts for it. And And that's one of the great things about these particular units working with solar, is they're very modular. And that's an important aspect moving forward, because all of the RTOs are going to performance-based accreditation. And so if you can't operate during those peak times, you're gonna take a hit in your accreditation. So that capacity that you think you may have, some of that will go away if you're not able to perform when you need to perform. I don't think I told you market lies, did I, Rebecca? Rebecca is our market expert. That looks like a really good project. And Darren's been great to work with, giving us some great direction. It's a really good site. Looks like it's coming together to be a really good project. Phase two, we've had some discussion with some other cities about phase two at the future. We'll kind of see, we're kind of looking to see what that looks like. But, once again, it's investment that other folks are making into your community. And, I was talking to Matt about that right before this meeting. This ties into your transmission system, and these units are really good at running in an island mode. And so assuming that you can island your system from the main grid, in the event of something really bad going on, those can operate it back and supply your city. And you'll have more than enough. I mean, if you had all 4 phases built, or both phases built, you'd probably got, 4 times what you'd need to run Hannibal?
Yep.
Yeah.
We need 55.
Yeah. That could be a big benefit too. And from an economic development standpoint, resiliency is going to be a really big deal.
What's it gonna do for the cost for the people?
Paul, can you answer that? Kind of what we looked at from last year's capacity costs, what it's gonna be with the new? Yeah, please put it to, here's a microphone. Pass the microphone around so
Okay.
talks we can record.
So, based on the last estimate that we received from you guys, I think it was, and we kind of looked at it megawatt day purposes, so about $450 a megawatt day in summer, $350 in the winter. It's still a moving target, obviously, but so total outlay for the year would be right about between $4.3 and $4.5 million for capacity, which is exactly what we paid in the current fiscal year that we're in right now. And so obviously, we know we're in the hole, so we're making that up with the proposed rate increase for next fiscal year. So that's what we'd be looking at going forward, starting in that fiscal 28-29 year.
Does that answer your question?
Okay, now we don't really understand.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand that either. So moving forward, after this rate increase of the 12%, would we have to require another rate increase to take care of this, or?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, we're paying $4.6 million this current fiscal year. Next year, we're gonna be paying about $1.3 million. Hopefully, we can continue to hedge in the next 2 fiscal years after that. Pay somewhere around that same, to kind of build that reserve back up. And then we'd be looking at more of a $4.5 million going forward. Now, again, that doesn't factor in the revenue share that you would get off of it. And it also provides stability, because we don't know what that auction is going to do every year. And I think probably the worst case scenario that I can see in my mind is that we were fortunately able to hedge for this upcoming fiscal year, but there were only 40 megawatts that were transacted the entire MISO Zone 5 footprint last year. 40. So not even enough to feed the entire load of Hannibal. So if that were to happen again, we could try to hedge all we wanted, and there just isn't any available. So we have a risk of those years into the future. So this provides more of that stability. Yes, it is more expensive, no doubt, but it provides that stability going forward. We know what we're going to pay, and we can budget for it long into the future.
So where do you project increase after this?
What we have talked about is that as we have the current proposal that we'll talk about here in a few minutes, starting here, that 12.2%, we should be, and we've already hedged for a couple of years. We're looking at adding to the reserve as we should, But as we come closer to that, we may be able to take some of that reserve and at least dampen those increases. It will be some increases, but we can plan for it. The other thing that's equally scary, I think Rebecca can back me up, is that come end of 2027, there's some things going on with Ameren, some of the things that are happening with them, that they're anticipating we're going to be hit very hard again with more capacity issues. So while today, we're going to tell you, if we were to take and get our rate increase that we're asking for that meets the requirements of our debt service policy, and then did about a 3% for the next couple of years after that, we'd be very close. And then we could also take that reserve and build that front end, load that. One of the things that, I think, is it Fredericktown, that had a 13 megawatt, two 13 megawatt units, they paid off theirs with that additional cash that was being produced in about 8.5 years. Is that correct? Am I misspeaking at all?
I don't have that one.
Okay.
You might be right, I just.
But anyways, we are not promising you that we're going to make a single penny off of that. However, this is, again, and I watched this is what the weekly cost of power is on the market. This one was May 17th to the 23rd. This was a spike up to $400. We've got spikes in there to $800. You've got weekly stuff. And so that is when it would be running and we would be making money that goes in and counteracts that. We're giving you the worst case scenario. We are being conservative. This is what we're doing. This is what we're working at. So there's no promises. Maybe the weather turns absolutely 65 degrees for the next 45 years. I don't think it will, but.
So essentially, it's not going to save any money, but it gives us a guarantee that we don't run out of power.
It gives us a guaranteed ceiling on that cost of capacity. It will not go above that for the 30 megawatts that we're going to buy. Will cost of power still go up? Yes, there's two other parts of it. Remember, this is capacity. There's the cost for electrons. That's still going to go up. There's going to be for the rest of our lives. And there's also the cost of transmission, the transportation of that power. Those are the three parts that we pay. This is only taking care of one of those.
You're not planning on another rate increase until like 2027.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm telling you that this coming year, we're going to talk about what is needed. As we're coming into this meeting, 12.2% is for this year. We have done some hedge work going forward that we believe will be awfully close there for the next year as well. But again, I'm not controlling transmission. That transportation cost has been going up on us. And the price of the electrons themselves have been going up on us. We've been, averaging 30, 35. We watched that. But we've been seeing in the mornings from 1 o'clock at night, we're hitting the 20s to 30s. But at the end of the day, come 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, we're seeing $60 and $55, $60 power. And we haven't seen that since then. And I think it's a huge sign of what the solar is doing to us. Solar and wind. And we can't avoid it. There's nothing we can do to avoid it.
And it's, oh, you're good. It's a cost you're not going to avoid because the planning reserve auction requires you to go out and buy your capacity if you don't have it. And so essentially, you're either taking Hannibal's money and investing it back in Hannibal, or you're taking Hannibal's money and you're investing it in Ameren. Because Ameren's going to put in the capacity. And as the planning reserve auction rolls up and the prices peak, that money is just being transferred to Ameren. Is kind of how it turns out. So that's why, I spent 26 years in Springfield, so I kind of have that controlling utility perspective. And I liked to be able to control what we were doing instead of somebody else controlling it for us. And it's kind of the choice you have to decide. If you go with the planning reserve auction, there's going to be times it's cheaper. There's going to be times it's more expensive. And are you okay with that volatility, and you okay with that money going somewhere outside of the city, or do you want to invest it back in and know what that price looks like, and know you're putting the money back into a facility that someday will be paid off, and the price won't keep increasing on that, and then you'll be, reaping a huge benefit when that's paid off.
So, where's the oversight for your business come in? Do you have your own board?
Darren's on our board.
So that'd be willing to work with our board?
Darren definitely, speaks for
I'm
your
the
board when,
I'm the secretary at the MEC,
yeah,
and so we have a voice there.
yeah. Yeah.
All right.
And we also have project pool meeting, or project meetings, project participant meetings, so there'll be meetings of the Northeast Generation Project talking about budget expenses, what's gonna be going on there in the next year, and what the planning horizon looks like for that project. Plus, that all gets approved by the MEC board, and Darren is on the MEC board.
We are also a part of, sorry, Steve, we're also a part of the Prairie State. So this PPA that we're looking at, James has been looking at, it is very similar to the very same PPA that we have with Prairie State. And I think I've shown adequately that Prairie State is actually a very good thing for us. To begin with, people want to throw rocks and beat us up for having it. Now it's really serving us very, very, very well. Unfortunately, it's going to be taken offline currently in 2038. That's the same PPA agreement. It has served us very well. This would be the same thing. We get to see and know exactly what kind of operations and maintenance is going into Prairie State. We know what's the operations that's going on. We have a voice as part owners. We are part owners because we're part of the agreement with MPUA that is a part owner of all of that Prairie State. So it's the same idea. We own this much of it, but we have a voice.
Well, that sounds better, because when I first heard the deal, I didn't think Hannibal was gonna benefit at all whatsoever off this deal. I had some questions, but nothing I can really think of right now. I think pretty much everything has been addressed, other than, like, what's the average cost of that the cost is gonna rise, on somebody's bill? Like, what are we supposed to tell them when they say, well, how much is my bill supposed to go up when this gets put in? Do you know what I'm supposed to?
From today, we're looking at the rate increase, the 12.2% that we proposed was going to be $19.74 for the average customer per month. So we're looking at another 10% above, what percent above that?
The rate increase that we proposed would be about $18, $19.
Will the bill stay the same every month, pretty much?
Again, it's about a $19 change for an average user of 1,200 kW. So it depends on how much you use, okay? So there's a variable in how much you use. And then you've got to, that's probably the biggest thing. So if you have the school, you're going to pay a bigger bill. It'll have a greater financial increase, but that percent is what we're looking at for the average bill is about $19.
And one thing that's probably worth mentioning is the way these are constructed. We'll have a construction loan as we're building it. You don't pay for anything until it's running. So until you start getting megawatts and capacity from it, you don't have any expenses for it. So those are all covered by MPUA, and those are financed into a bigger financing. It's part of that, economies of scale and aggregating it together. So you don't pay anything until it comes online. So the Fulton unit probably comes online sometime middle of 27. Hannibal units are probably coming online, second quarter 29, somewhere around there. So you won't see any bills until it's producing power. And if for some reason it would, that's just how that works.
And also, just the other night on Facebook, I had a big discussion about certain things people want. One thing people want to see is more 20+ dollar an hour jobs headed toward Hannibal. Can you say anything on that, or?
Well, I'll tell you, you're going to have construction jobs during the construction. And one of the things I should have mentioned is part of this, you're going to run a gas lateral into that technology park. So you'll have high-pressure gas delivered into that technology park. So if you're continuing to market it to other participants, you know, now you have high-pressure gas on site. You also have these units. A great characteristic of these units too is it has an exhaust heat system. You know, the heat that comes, the exhaust that comes out of it is extremely hot. You can recapture that and make steam, and they call that combined heat power. And so there are entities out there that are looking for steam, and that could be a great steam supply for them is to partner on something. And we have done that with an ethanol plant, a couple ethanol plants, is that we put a generator in the ethanol plant, we exhaust the heat, they recapture that, and they make steam with it. And so they get a reduced cost of steam, we get a reduced cost of power. And so, you know, from an economic development marketing the land perspective, you now have on-site generation, which resiliency is a bigger and bigger. So now you have on-site generation, which is huge. You have the ability to market some kind of combined heat power, which we'd love to work with you all, you know, if there's some desire for that. You have high-pressure gas that's now on the site, so if somebody is looking for some type of gas user, you now have gas that's on the site. So it seems like there's quite a bit of advantage to go moving forward with the project.
They'll also be building a road into the technology park, which will be a benefit.
Yeah, I heard about the road. It's gonna be quite a road put in there, I believe.
Can I ask, and unless there's other questions, and please ask, but my question is of John and the mayor and those groups. How soon would we like to have this? What do we need to move forward on this? What are the points and how quickly, or do you think we could move on these decisions? And that's the question for both the mayor and for John.
I mean, we're going through the process right now. James is reviewing the land purchase agreement. Obviously looking at your all's in the purchase power agreement. So a lot of it, I think we're just kind of waiting on legal opinion, and then we'll have to go back to the council for final approval, just like I'm sure John will have to take it back to his board for final approval. I would hazard a guess. I mean, I don't think it's long-term, but I probably won't have an answer for you in the next week or two.
Oh, yeah. No, we understand that. And our only time pressure is, boy, the data centers are buying these units up. So we, a couple months ago, entered into a letter of intent to purchase the Hannibal units with kind of a favorable cancellation clause so that we weren't really out any expense. That locked in both the production slot and your cost, because both of those were getting a little unwieldy. We probably have the ability to go back because we are a good customer of theirs and probably can work on trying to extend that a little bit. It'd be nice to know what that is, but I think we probably have the ability to go back and lean on them a little bit to try and get that extended because they understand where we're at. And so I think we can work on that. But it is, what the data centers are going crazy and they love these units too because they're a perfect size for them to put in multiple ones so that they can supply themselves.
So a time frame you'd like to shoot for that we get this 30 days?
30 days.
45?
I think if we could do 30, it'd be great.
45 pushing too far?
We'll probably ask for 45, but it would be great.
But that's an ask. Would 30 be crazy to work forward?
I mean, I know I got the majority of the council here, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I mean, I think as long as James has,
As far as I'm concerned, I'm done with the contract. I'm waiting for input from Darren and input from you all. He had some issue that he was concerned about power, and I don't understand his issue. I think that if the purchase power agreement is entered into, you can reference it in the real estate contract. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm done with the real estate contract.
we'll get it back in front of the council for their approval or not. 30 days.
Okay.
I should be able to get it in front of the council.
Yeah, that'll work. That'll work.
Okay.
Yes.
I've got a quick question. You're indicating you can recapture this heat, produce steam. Would that be available only, and that's marketable, would that be available only when units are running?
Well, we
How
generally,
would that work?
what we generally have done with the ethanol plants is we will self-commit those, so we run them all the time. But they're paying part of the gas, we're paying part of the gas, so we get cheap power and they get cheap steam. So we, as part of that deal, knowing that we're getting a reduced price of power, we just know we're gonna run it all the time.
Okay,
Now, depending on what their needs are and what, sometimes we will let the market dispatch it. So at night, it may reduce it to lower load, and during the day, it may ramp it up to a higher load, but it's making steam all the time. But essentially, that's something we would negotiate with whoever we're negotiating with.
so basically the unit would be running all the time
It'd be running all the
to produce the heat and therefore the steam.
That's how we deal with our ethanol plants, is they run, 8,000 hours a year. Because the unit, they'll take a little bit of downtime for maintenance on the unit, a little bit of downtime for maintenance on the ethanol plant. Besides that, it's online running.
And you all have to like follow the same laws and ordinances that we do, right?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So like emergency and first responders and all that's gonna be allowed out to your facility.
Oh, yeah,
Go.
we usually take the fire departments on tours, we bring them through and let them look at the place, we'll talk about hazards. Simple cycle gas turbines, probably, you have a high pressure gas main and you have fuel oil. That's your two real hazards.
Right.
Because these are so low emitting, we've been able to get away from a lot of the pollution control equipment that some of the other units have to put in. And so we generally don't have ammonia on site or anything like that because we don't have to put in those kind of systems. We pay extra to get a system that runs at lower emission rates, so we don't have to put those systems in.
Right. Does it promote cleaner air, stuff like that, or will it, will it pollute the air?
These are extremely, extremely clean. The ones we just permitted in Marshall, we didn't have any problems permitting with the Department of Natural Resources. They were actually very complimentary. In fact, we had to explain, they were concerned that our numbers for emissions were actually too low because they were surprised that they were as low as they were. But like I said, we paid extra to get units that are low emitting, so we don't have to put the cleanup equipment on them. But no, that's worked great. And from a renewable perspective, these tie into renewables very good, very well. And so if you were, thinking of the big picture in the future, the bigger units that are base loaded are having a tougher time dealing with renewables. These units where they can quick start, run, and then turn back off again really help facilitate renewables. And so it reduces your risk, but also from a renewable perspective, it puts them actually even in a better spot. And that's why you're seeing Ameren putting in, how many did they have in their plant? 10 of these, of the big units? Quite a few. Associated is putting in 2 to 5 of these. They're putting in 400 megawatt simple cycle units, so they're putting in big ones. But Associated's putting in 2 to 5 of them. Evergy, I think, is putting in 3 or 4 of them. So all of the utilities have kind of seen this as the way of the future because you need them to be able to start and stop quick. Because with all the volatility of the wind and sun, you need to be able to supplement that. And these work very well for that. That's why a quick start's super important because as that wind starts to die down, you want to be able to hit a button and keep the lights on.
Do any of the other council members have any other questions or anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. All right, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
See
you
you
coming.
later. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out. So it looks like Paul's up for a financial report, please.
All right, hopefully this one works a little better. I know they ran out, but thank you to the MPUA team for all of that, and I know they've put a ton of work into it so far, so we do appreciate them doing that for us. And I think just one more point to further iterate, we just wrapped up May, which we're about to look at the financials for, but every single day in May, and for the entire spring season, we paid over $19,000 a day for capacity. Go back to fiscal years 21 and 22, we paid $41,000 and $45,000 for capacity for the entire year. And so just this up and down volatility and being able to provide something that is steady, something that we can budget better for and not have to always worry about the auction would be extremely beneficial. All right, so let's start here with the balance sheet. Total cash did drop again this month from the month before by about $355,000, and total cash reserve-wise, we were about $6.9 million less than a year ago. There's really no other significant changes on the balance sheet. We're down about 2.3% in total assets from a year ago. The income statement for May, utility-wide, we did have a net loss of $579,000. The electric fund specifically was the primary reason. It had a net loss of $580,000. and that was $150,000 more than we had budgeted. We did see lower revenues for the month of May. It was a cool month, if you recall, and we did see kilowatt hour sales come in about 5.5% less than the year before. We also, again, had higher purchase power energy costs. Despite it being a cooler month, we have continued to see a rise in LMPs. And later on in Matt's report, you can kind of see what LMP pricing, which is the price that we pay for energy, has done the last 6 months. It's been about a 35% increase on average for the last 6 months over last year's purchase power costs. The water fund did have a net loss of $7,000 for the month. We did recognize and account for the final carbon changeout of the fiscal year that now costs us $110,000 every time we do that changeout. And then we've got the sewer fund that did finish the month right at budget. So going back a year ago, the electric fund did perform much worse again this year due to the higher purchase power costs. Talked about the kilowatt hour sales being down, but I also wanted to point out that they were 2% lower than the 5-year average. The water fund also did worse this year due to recognizing that carbon changeout this month, and the sewer fund was comparable to the year before. Gallons wise, we were down about 1.7% in water from last year and about 2.6% less in sewer. So year to date, we are now 11 months into fiscal year 25, and if we update our budget to reflect the 9% rate increase in amortized capacity for the year, the electric fund's net loss is now $3.6 million, and that is about $1.6 million more than budgeted. Revenues are slightly less than budget, but it's, again, purchase power that continues to run high as it's now 8% over budget for the year. The water fund does have a net income of $404,000, which is $104,000 behind budget. We've discussed this several times, but we are going to account for 5 carbon changeouts this fiscal year instead of the normal 4. And then the sewer fund has a net income of $89,000, which is $145,000 less than where we expected to be. And as we've discussed in that fund, we do have a generator that we've been renting at the wastewater plant to aid those compressors that went down a year ago. We do have the new compressors on site. I believe we've got 1 installed, if not 2. But that cost should come down significantly next fiscal year. So May of 2025 compared to where we were last year, May of 2024, the utility-wide net loss of $3.2 million is $1.7 million worse than last year. Obviously, revenues are up 6.3% with the rate adjustments that we did. However, net purchase power is now 20.1% more than it was a year ago at this point. And then operating expenses are up 3.8%. Scroll down on the dashboard there to page, I think it's 12. Our debt service coverage ratio, we did see a slight downturn in electric with the loss again. We're now at a negative 3.11. Water saw a slight improvement to a 1.94, and sewer lost a couple ticks, a couple basis points down to a 3.11 in sewer. And then I've got our normal reports in there that show cash reserves, investments, and our credit card statement and check register for the month of May. Any questions on the financials for May?
Kelly, anything?
I don't have anything.
Nope. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
No questions.
So next item is the budget, correct? Yes. So you'll recall we approved the fiscal year 2026 budget at our April board meeting, like we normally do. And in that budget, we did have an amount budgeted for fringe benefits for our insurance of $1.6 million. That budget did not include the finalized amount that we expect to pay for fringe benefits next year after finalizing that contract for medical insurance with MCHCP. And so once we finalize that contract, we do anticipate to spend $1.1 million in next year's budget, so about $500,000 or so less. And so we've went ahead and made and reflected that change in the new budget there before you. Additionally, it was also discovered that we had left a rate class off of our projection for revenues in the sewer fund. Those would be our Rawls County water folks that have water with Rawls County, but they have sewer through us. We had left that rate class off of there, and so we've added that back to be as accurate as possible, and that did result in $252,000 more in revenues budgeted for the sewer fund next year. And then lastly, the city council did request that we look at changing the amount that the employer, that the BPW contributes to the premium for any non-individuals from 75% to 50%. So currently the rate that's contributed is 75%. That rate is negotiated by the union in their contract. And as you know, the union contract that we are currently in expires at the end of this calendar year, so December 31st of 25. And so we did go ahead and look at what that would save us if we were to go from 75% to 50% starting January 1st of 26. And the savings there would be approximately $68,300 in total for next fiscal year. And so we did not reflect that change in the budget that is before you, since as of today, we do still have that 75% rate in our union contract. And so that'll all be negotiated later this year. So with all of those changes that were made, so if we left the rate adjustments that were already approved the same, the net income company-wide for next fiscal year would be $2.1 million compared to the original budgeted net income of $1.4 million. And so if we reassess everything in order to meet our cash reserve policy and add 5% of our prior year gross revenues back to our cash reserves in our electric fund, it would require $1,420,000 in cash reserves. And so in order to achieve that level, that rate increase, that rate adjustment in electric does drop from 12.2% to 11.4%. And then the budget there before you does still include the 3% rate adjustment in the water fund. So all of that information is there with the changes that we discussed, and so we are requesting that the board go ahead and approve the revised fiscal year 2026 operating budget as presented. And I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Paul, one other item that we were going to look at was to wait for an auction that came later.
Yep.
I didn't know if that had any adjustments to it or not.
Yeah, so we budgeted $1,355,000 for capacity. If it wasn't that, it was $1,370,000. Based on the auction results, we only had exposure in the winter, and so because that winter did clear at a lower price, she threw it up there. I think it was $33. That amount that we're going to pay next year did drop slightly. So we're going to pay $1,335,000 next year for capacity. So about a $40,000.
Okay. Not significant enough to make a change to the
right. Yeah.
budget.
That's the difference between 5 or 10 degrees hotter one day than the next. Yep.
Yeah. And I think it's worthwhile keeping the 60 whatever thousand in the budget in the event that our negotiation with the union doesn't allow us to do that. So if we do end up getting a better deal, then we'll be positive, but we won't know that until January 1, I guess.
Can I speak to that point, John?
Sure. I was going to ask.
I wasn't on the council at the time, but I'm pretty sure the council gave the board a directive to plan for that in this budget. So I guess my question is, the board is going to refuse that directive from the council?
Well,
I understand about a union contract and negotiation. That's something that Darren and the team, and however the city council chooses to work with you guys on the upcoming contracts, because I think there's some conversations that are going to be coming about who's negotiating that and what that looks like. It's a give and take. I think the council made it pretty clear. Again, I wasn't there, so I can't speak to their intentions, but of how they wanted that to move forward. So I would say that would just be something that your board would have to look at in your collective bargaining agreements with the union. If it changes something else that you have to give up for that or whatever. I just want to, before you vote, I want to make sure that you're going against the directive of the council.
No, that's not it at all. All I'm talking about is a $60,000 amount to leave in the budget. The plan is going to offer the 50% match and see where that lays. Whether somebody believes that that amount needs to be put in the budget, since the contract dates are year end and our fiscal years are July, it's kind of a philosophical point. You know, do we want to take it out or put it in? I guess if we want to count every single egg and what it will potentially be would be one thing. But things that split fiscal years and calendar years, I mean, I don't know if it's a philosophical point or.
Well, you mean you budget for 6 months at 75% and 6 months at 50%. I mean, I'm pretty sure Paul could figure that out.
Well, didn't you say you were, like, as of right now, stating you were gonna just leave it as it was, leaving that at 75 for the entire 2026 budget? Yeah.
Well, let's
So,
carry
you
that
know,
thought process out a little bit. Do we also put in the budget what we anticipate to have for a increase in union pay?
Yeah, that was going to be my next kind of point. I mean, I think we've got to be conservative here with that too. I mean, we don't know where this is going to land. And so I think the budget that we have right now assumes a 4% increase in the union pay as of January 1st. And so, yeah, if that were to be, if we were to take the 75% down to the 50%, well, just knowing how negotiations go, there's likely going to be something else that would be added. Now, we don't know that, but I think in my mind that the conservative play, not knowing what's going to happen with those negotiations, is to go ahead and leave it in, because we don't know what that rate of pay is going to be either January 1st.
I'd like to add on to that too, if possible. So I will speak to my thought process here. It's not about the pay. It's not about, there's certain things that we can't do as a city and a board. We have to pay linemen $100,000. We would love to pay our firefighters $100,000. We can't do that. We have to get the playing field level, closer back together. And one way to do that is through benefits, to show that we're all city employees and we're all on the same page. So things that have been skewed for many, many years, where way back in the day, police and fire were 75%, the board was 75%. That gap never closed or never moved. The board ultimately decided to add an extra vacation day when you negotiated a contract. The board members have one extra vacation day versus the rest of the city employees. Things along those lines and those benefits create animosity, and I think that's where the council's intent was with the 50% match, to try to level that playing field. Again, I wasn't there. I can't comment to their line of thinking at the time, but I do want to reiterate the council was very clear in their directive on how they wanted you to budget that out. And I'm just asking John as the chairman, if you choose to leave that in there, you're going to go against what the council instructed you to do. Is that correct?
Then we are going to have to increase the amount for salaries.
We have, not necessarily, we have to collect and bargain with police and fire all the time. We have to make those
Does it
tough
matter
decisions.
that there's a contract involved?
We have to make those.
Does it matter that there's a contract with a union involved or not?
The renegotiating will go back out, December or January 1. So like he was saying, you could do half a year at 75 and then drop down to that 50%.
You gotta push that button.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought that's what the plan already was, to drop down at the first of the year.
Well, all Daryl's talking about is making a budget change to anticipate going from the 75% to the 50% for 6 calendar months. I don't have a problem with doing that, and that will fulfill the intention of what we are going to offer. And it gives a blind eye to everything else, but it sounds like it's kind of just a quiver, arrow in the quiver about, we said it, so it's going to happen. So I don't have a problem with having Paul make that small change for a 6-month period to account for the reduction to 50% after January 1.
I also think that when your board gets together for your special meeting and kind of go over some of my questions, you'll very easily be able to come up with some of that money for that reduction.
So, quick question for you though. If we decide not to budget that, and then push comes to shove and we have to budget that, where are we supposed to find that extra money?
I mean, that's a great question, Cole. We're faced with that every day. We have a deficit spending budget too. And I'll just say this out loud. We got a public safety tax that's going to come up. If that doesn't pass, there's a pretty good chance we're laying off people. You're going to have to find it. It's $68,000 according to Paul. If you're negotiating that in a union contract, I can't imagine that you're negotiating out $68,000 that you're talking about way more than 4% increases, but that's up to your collective bargaining teams and how that looks moving forward. So
I guess it's up to us whether we want to direct Paul to take that 6 months worth of budget and not be, well, and then take what it is that whatever we get with the union negotiation.
It kind of seems like we're putting the cart before the horse almost.
I personally see it as what the council came up with and said, let's balance the playing field and give 50%, shoot for that in your collective bargaining. To me, this 68,000 in the budget is kind of whoopee. The budget doesn't matter. What matters is what comes out of the collective bargaining. That's the key.
Well, and everything can be negotiated.
Yes,
So there's no reason why.
but my point being $68,000 in the size of their budget kind of, okay.
Agreed.
But they know that what we expect out of them for collective bargaining is that 50% threshold.
Well, regardless, that's what is set. That is what it will be. However, they choose to come
Yes.
up with that or do that is up to them.
Right.
The budget doesn't reflect intentions, and I think a lot of what we see is citizens looking at that. Is the budget reflecting what is being asked, or is it not? I believe your intention is to do exactly what has been asked, but it doesn't necessarily reflect that. And I think that's really what comes to the core to it. Is someone from outside, citizen looking at that, does it reflect that there is agreement, that there is togetherness?
That's also starting contract negotiation today by saying, okay, folks, January 1, this is all you're getting in this bucket. So they got 6 months to figure out where to pump it up in other buckets. It's more semantics than requirement, but I understand what you're talking about, Daryl. You came up, or somebody came up with a directive that says all employees will be the same. We happen to be mid-contract negotiation, and we're just saying, okay, union, this particular issue, it's my way or the highway on it, and they're going to have 6 months to circle their wagons and figure out what they can do. It's semantics. I don't particularly have a problem with asking Paul to change it, but when we do it, it's formal, and negotiations have started today. I mean, do you see it any other way?
I mean, you're a budget that can be amended any time. So if to your point of contract negotiations, if it needs to be negotiated out where you come back to the council and say, we've been negotiating back and forth, your directive was this, we budgeted for your directive, but we just can't get there. Is there any leeway? That, I mean, again, I wasn't on the council when they made that decision. You could always come back and the council could change their mind. I don't know. I don't consider it a form of contract negotiations. It's part of your budgeting, which can be amended by a vote of your board.
And I think once some of these questions are addressed within their board, that money will easily be able to be.
James, what's your interpretation of the directive and if we leave it one way or the other in this budget?
I think you all have argued it well both directions. I mean, you know, from a practical stance, here's the deal. The council doesn't have direct authority to tell you you shall do this or you shall do that. But if you don't, they've got the power to remove you and appoint a board that will do it. So, you know, you and I've had this discussion where my point is, if the council specifically advises you they want something done, it's probably a good idea to do that unless you have some major reason why you think that's an inappropriate action to take. So from the standpoint of the directive, et cetera, I think what I'm hearing from looks like a majority of the council is they want you to do it. So I guess from a practical standpoint, my suggestion would be change your budget, and if it's not covered by this budget, you'll have to do a budget amendment to cover whatever the contract works out to be. To your point regarding, does that signal to the union something? Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. It makes a signal, but of course, you know, the thing you need to remember is IBEW is one of the toughest negotiating unions in the United States, so they're going to be wooling you no matter what. So I don't know that I'd fret and stew too much about it because, like I say, historically they have been very, very hard negotiators anyway. So
do we have,
go ahead. It's as easy as just amending, you know, come January, if the negotiations don't go the way we see, and it's just amending the budget, I don't know why we would go against it.
I mean, I don't have an issue with it, really. Daryl, you know, I'm 100% in your corner with the safety thing, you know, where I come from. But it's gonna be tough for negotiations. But
And we're not trying to tie one arm behind your back, but we've got to level that playing field. And I think that was my intent when I was on the council previously, when I sat in your seat. I think that was their intent then. And sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug.
True.
I mean, I would love to pay all of our employees 100%, 75%, all across the city. They're all very deserving of it. Everybody in this building, everybody that works for every other branch of the city government. But the reality is we're not there.
Can you speak to why there's a difference? Just why is the board at 75% and the city at 50 now?
That was before my time when that transpired, so I couldn't tell you.
Was that just recently though, right?
yeah, it was a recent.
Yeah, like in June or
firefighters
something,
in
right,
place just
yeah.
recently got it.
No, it's been that way for a few years.
Has it?
The city,
In 2016,
they
I
gave
think.
up a percentage of their health care cost for wages.
So in 2014, the negotiation between the union, they had a choice whether or not to take a higher wage increase and lower that 75% down to 50%. And they chose to stick with the 75% contribution and take the lower wage increase.
It was a 2% increase.
Some wage increases.
Beverly's got all that information if we need to track it down. You mean between what the
I
city
think the
got?
city got a 4% while the DPW got a 2%. I think that was the trade-off. Matt, do you remember?
I don't remember exactly.
That would have been negotiated with your union, not through the city.
But that was what the decision was made, and that's what I think it was actually through the EBT board that was done.
Now, am I correct in saying some of the firefighters still pay a different percentage than 50%?
Not to my knowledge.
At one point, I was under the understanding that they paid 65% of some of the firefighters.
That's what the audit
There was a
states.
change in one of the contract negotiations with them where some of the tenured people maintained the 65%.
I'd have to find that out. I'm pretty sure when I left.
I think the issue was that, because that's back when we had a fire board. It's been a while back, but as I recall, it was a negotiation that the fire board did with the firefighters union that said everyone who's hired from this date forward will be on the same schedule as all the other city employees, but anybody that was hired before that date will keep you on that prior larger percentage. Now, how many are left? I can't tell you because, like I say, it's been a while, Matt. It was. I'm pretty confident that was a fire board negotiation, but to Matt's point, I'm about 90% sure that he's correct because I do recall that.
Negotiations. You brought up a holiday. I know here for a long time, the city got off Martin Luther King Day, and we've only had it off since this previous negotiation. So I mean, these have never been the same. There's been different negotiations amongst the different unions or different entities. That correcting it all, there's little nuances to it all.
In history.
Perhaps if a primary focus and goal is to make sure that there's some similarity between general city employees' deal and the board employees, in particular unionized employees, I'm going to suggest that maybe there ought to be some kind of a framework or a guideline given to the law firm that negotiates it. And I don't know who you guys are using this time around, but maybe if they had that framework and knew that there was some expectation they work within those confines, because to the issue of how these negotiations run, they're usually long, multi-day, and there's this and there's that, and they give a little bit here, and if there's some need for some things to be set in stone, you probably need for the negotiators to know that. I've never been part of that particular negotiation, but I have been here when the negotiating attorney reported back to the board, and I can tell you it's weird. Sometimes they'll be really focused on this thing and give really easy on this thing, but if there's an outline, that would probably make that negotiation go a lot more to tune of what you guys want.
That would probably help, and as much as the city would like to get all employees alike, as long as we're dealing with multiple unions, I don't know whether we'll ever get there.
Well,
correct me if I'm wrong, aren't there Board of Public Works employees that are union and then non-union, but they're
That's correct.
still getting paid union?
That's because it's prevailing wage in Missouri.
I can't hear you.
That's because
No,
it's prevailing
they're
wage.
They're different job titles. There are
Okay.
certain job titles that are union. There's some that are not.
Right, why are they
myself,
still getting
ours
the
are
same
not.
pay or benefit as if they were union?
Again, like your discussion, trying to make sure everything's unified and people don't have jealousies across the board. That's why we do.
Which actually kind of goes to the point of what the city's trying to make is that we recognize that internally in the board and the problem being that, and because I hear from city employees and they gripe about how good the board's got it. Now, I'm not taking on that stance, but I'm just telling you that that's what the mayor and the council are getting.
Frankly, we've got it
pushback.
we have the very, everywhere you are,
It's
you have the very same thing.
The grass is always greener.
We have it internally as well.
But to a certain extent, back to my point, if you guys would figure out some hit points that you really, really need to be the same, and if you convey that to every negotiating team that you have, regardless of what the union is, you're going to be more likely to get some consistency. So.
So I think to keep things heading toward consistency, I don't have a problem with asking Paul to make that change at the end of the annual contract and to show it as the 50%, even though you already know what my reservations are about tipping your hand to negotiations in advance, but I have no problem with that.
Do we need to make a motion for that?
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So Paul, if you could please make the.
I can do it now if you'd like. That's the beauty of Excel.
Change anything but your name.
So that would $68,300, which would be $34,150 saved starting January 1st in electric. Pushes that net income
that cash contribution that we're trying to hit, that target, that 1,420,000, it pushes that up, obviously, $31,000. And so if we were to stick with hitting that target of 1,420,000, we would drop the rate adjustment down, not 11.3. Let's see, 11.2% rate adjustment gives us $1,420,800. So right at that.
11.2 from what was, what you had, 11.4?
11.4.
He just said 11.4. Okay. So
12.2, 11.4, now 11.2.
So again, back to the level playing field and back to where I think this whole thing started months and months ago. Questions were asked, what can you do to minimize the impact on this rate increase?
This is
We
one,
just
yeah.
0.2%, but it is
Makes
in the
sense.
right direction. It is in good faith. We are protecting the citizens and the taxpayers. We're looking at every option. Whether you vote on that or not, just even having the conversation to have Paul show those numbers of what something is significant
Yeah.
as a $68,000 difference is
32,000.
0.2% on your overall rate increase.
But my point being, the original rate increase they were shooting for was 12.2, and now we're down to 11.2, so you dropped 1% in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
And to Cole's point, it's not comfortable. I'm not sure where you're going to get the 68,000 from. Because if I knew that, I would be telling my people at City Hall where I could find $53,000 from, because that's what our deficit is.
But all the departments have had to make significant cuts. It's crazy how much each department has had to cut.
I just know that we have years of experience of negotiating these contracts, and like Matt was saying, if you give up one, it typically, now, we don't hope that it goes that way, but you typically make up for it on the other. And so that was the point of budgeting it conservatively. So, but
Sorry.
So, yeah, everything in the water stays the same. Are there any other questions about how that would change the budget? Obviously, you don't have it in front of you now, but it would only be that one line item for fringe benefits, which is actually medical and dental benefits. GL account 926.10 is the only line item that would change, medical and dental benefits. If not, I don't know if we need to make a new motion to present the budget as I have it here.
It'd probably be the best if we do.
The motion was made to have me change it, which has been done, so we probably need a new budget.
Make a motion.
As presented.
As amended
There
is
you
how
go.
you usually turn it.
Okay. I better save this thing.
I'll make that motion.
To have it amended.
To
I'll second.
approve it as amended. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good stuff.
Okay, I will send that out through to you guys again, and then obviously through the proper channels with Melissa, like we would normally do, and then we'll get it posted to our website and replace the old.
Okay.
All right. You get too much of me tonight. I apologize. The city council has, the way I understand it, has requested that we add the Hannibal Convention and Visitors Bureau and Molly Brown House to the list of entities that are receiving free utilities. Right now, if you look at our schedule of rates and fees in our electric section, we have certain entities that receive no charge. And so any time that we change a rate, fee, or charge per city charter, we do have to have a public rate hearing to do that. And so you've got the draft of the new schedule of rates and fees with that change in it. And where they're going from is having a discounted rate, the Hannibal Visitors and Convention Bureau. And so they're going from having a discounted rate to having no charge. So essentially free utilities.
What's that going to do to a rate increase?
Their bill averages between $5 and, at the worst, $1,000 a month.
Okay.
And so, yeah, you're losing I guess worst case scenario would be 12,000, but it's probably more like $9,000 to $10,000 in revenue.
So we'd have to make that up somewhere. Where, I mean, where are we gonna make that up?
So now we're at $78,000.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question that I've been, I mean, I heard about this, I guess when I talked to you, and I've been kind of kicking it around. I don't know where we'd come up with that. I mean, it's not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but
If you
That's
put that
70.
back in, that brings that up to what, 11.34?
So is tourism, they're funded by bed tax, I guess. I didn't know if there's any other mechanism in there that took care of the building that they have, or what the cost of salaries and benefits and things like that. I'm assuming that all falls under the city with the same type of benefit structure.
They're paying it all out of the bed tax. Their whole budget comes out of the bed tax. I'm pretty confident.
All their salaries
Pretty confident.
and all of their facilities.
Yes.
I'll say this. This is the general consensus that I got speaking to the council. At the end of the day, the citizens own this utility. They own City Hall. They own every other building in the city. We're not going to pay ourselves to keep the lights on. We own it. Tourism is the last of all the city buildings that are billed for. The City Hall, fire station, police station, I pay utilities. I pay ourselves utilities. Wow. Again, yes, that is a number that you're going to have to come up with based on Paul's numbers. You're $6,000 to $12,000 on that average.
Couldn't that money be made up with the insurance savings though?
I mean, there's a lot of different ways of looking at that, I suppose. But like, I mean, I understand you're talking about now. You said 78,000. I think Kelly said that you got to come up with. You have a $40 million budget. I have a $14 million budget. I'm trying to come up with $50,000. Like, and that goes back to the whole big conversation of the playing field. At the end of the day, the taxpayers that we all work for and represent own all of this. We have to make some ground up somewhere, and I don't know what else to say.
I don't either. I really don't. It's just a question I've been thinking about for a while, you know.
A very valid.
Sorry, I just feel like I need to look at you
No,
when
it's
you're
all right.
talking. But Paul, do you have the numbers? So if hypothetically, when we drop from that 75 to 50% per employee, we're saving money paying in from that insurance. Wouldn't we have X amount of dollars in savings from insurance?
Yeah, but he just took that out of
He just took it.
from the 11.4 down to 11.
Right, but how much did we save with that?
It was,
Just in insurance alone?
But he's already moved it down to 11.2 because of that. So then they have to
The
raise
rate
it back up to
increase was lower.
11.3 to.
You've got credit.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not.
Well, the budget's been adjusted. So that's what we anticipate having a change in net income. And that's what he did with the budget. The budget has, here's how much we plan to make, here's how much we plan to spend. And when you bring in less and you pay out less, the delta doesn't change.
So that's already like pretty much auto-populated with that drop? Like what it would save as far as going out?
yeah, so the change in fringe benefits in total that we had overestimated got us from the 12.2 rate adjustment to the 11.4%. The additional change in the 75% contribution down to the 50% contribution got us down to 11.2%. And that's what the board just voted to approve in the budget.
Okay, so on your numbers, what would that save us just in insurance alone? What did that save the board from having to pay out is what I'm saying? Does that, I didn't know if that would show on you. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's already been reflected.
$32,000.
34,000, I think
Okay,
it was.
I just want to make sure that I understood that correctly.
Yeah.
So whether we decide to have the board supply electricity at no charge to the entities we're talking about, the tourism, ultimately, the thing I wanted to explore is that I didn't know if it was a different type of entity that didn't have the ability to be covered by the franchise fee characteristic of the city. That's the only place I was going.
I wasn't present for the discussion when they talked about having the board provide electricity for free, and I certainly don't want to say something that's going to undercut the council, but
Well,
I don't know.
So on the 29th, the mayor came and visited me, and he said it came with the unanimous vote of the council.
That's not what I said, but that's okay.
That,
Carry on.
that the council completely supported it and agreed to it, that there were
It is
4
not what I
demands.
said, but that's okay.
What's that?
It's not what I said. You like to put words in my mouth like you did when we met.
There's 4 demands that were made. Number
Those aren't
1,
Demands.
Yeah.
Demands imply
Clearly, I
that
need
there's
to
negotiation.
okay. 4 items that he said needed to happen, that the council supported him on. Number 1 was, we had asked, and it was on the 29th, we were going to be meeting on the 3rd. And those 12 questions that April has shared, that we said, can you give us any extra time? And they said, absolutely not. You guys demanded that we would be there on the 3rd. We would have all of those questions answered. Now, I would ask, and maybe I'm going to put this on Mr. Munger, that April says we have not answered them. And I believe if you look at the questions, we've had to distill some of the information down to where we actually know what the questions are and that we have answered them. So I would ask you to go back and look at that. Okay? Would you please do that and make sure that we have answered those questions? The second item that he said was, we need to make sure that we add you, the mayor, and city council to the iPad. This is from my notes. Can I go through and then you can do it?
Is this an agenda item?
This is part of the discussion of budget and the discussion about giving free utilities to
We're on
the tourism.
We're on the topic of a public hearing for a rate meeting.
Correct.
Is this
So the
all-
third item, so not only was that for the iPads, and Matthew has given that out to everybody. You've received that. If you respond to that email, he can help you get to that information. The third item was, we would give free utilities to the tourism. In order for us to do that above board, as transparent as we possibly can, we need to have a rate hearing where we change our tariff and add those buildings to that tariff. Not a big deal. That's what we have on the other, that's what we have in our tariff. It's here, we can do that, and then next, we've already told Trish that we will not charge her any utilities, it's taken care of. The fourth item was that we would give the HREDC a seat, that we're paying $140,000 a year to support economic development here in the Hannibal region. We believe that's an appropriate and an important thing to do, but we're giving one of the seats that we're paying for to the city. And then the mayor said, if we don't do this, they're going to put people in your seats that will make sure that that happens. I would ask, have we satisfied those demands?
Okay, let me just stop you right there. And for everybody on the board up there, this is in the packet that I gave you, but I took the liberty of looking up the definition of the word demand, or demanded, as you said in your email last Friday. And the definition is to feel a strong sense of obligation or pressure to fulfill a certain request, or the feeling of something being demanded implies a lack of freedom or choice in a situation. It also notes that it is important to distinguish this demand feeling from a simple request or preference. A request allows for the possibility of refusal, while a preference is a desirable outcome, yet not something considered necessary. Let me be very clear when I say my questions are not a request or preference for the Board of Public Works to pick and choose what they feel they prefer to answer and not answer. This is not a negotiation, and if questions cannot, won't, aren't answered, it must be for a reason. Nonetheless, it is our job to be transparent with the people that put us in this position, you, us, all of us here, entrusted us to uphold the oath we took to them. And as I said in my previous email, why should the Hannibal Board of Public Works be treated differently than any other department? We should be fair to all the departments and entities of the city, period. And anyone on council or the board that disagrees with that and thinks we should go against our charter, AKA the law, will be deliberately disobeying the oath that we all took. So whether it's us on council or you guys up there, we all took the same oath. We have to uphold the law, the charter. So you think it's okay to deliberately go against the law, the charter?
No, I agree completely. I love your definition of demand.
It's not my definition. Like, you can Google the
very
definition
good.
yourself by all means.
Absolutely, but I think it fits very well. And those are the demands that were made, and we're following through.
But you're saying
so
it's
that
a
we're
demand.
not-
It's not a demand, Darren.
Well, I feel like if there was a conversation about if we don't do what you want, we will be impeached, then that is a demand.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, I feel like if there was a conversation about if we don't do what you want, then we will be impeached. I think that makes that a demand.
That was never.
If that conversation happens.
Yes, it was.
So the conversation that I had with Darren was simply my opinion, is what I told Darren in your office. I said, this could go one of three ways. This is what I talked to the council, with the council about, that I'm bringing to you. Three options. You can comply with this. We can replace the board with people that will carry out the will of the city council, which is what James alluded to earlier. Or there's a possibility that it could be put up for the citizens to vote on to remove the board altogether. Yes or no?
That's exactly true.
I told you that was my opinion of how that could go one of three ways. That is, Darren, I told you in your office, that was not the council's decision as a whole. That's how I interpreted it. You know that.
And I don't believe that was true, but that's what I had the mayor telling me those three things. So how do you interpret that?
The point we need to get off this argumentation about is the item at hand. We do need to have a rate hearing to decide whether to give
I have a legal question
electricity.
about that for James, if you'll indulge me. On page 8 of 12 in the included packet, which would be, I think it's 56 page total on the packet, but it's 8 of 12 of that subsection. It talks about municipal city service rates, and you added the Molly Brown Housing Convention Visitors Bureau, and then crossed out the single-phase service below that. But is that a necessary change? Because if you read the definition, it says applicable to all city departments at one location is 60 cycle single-phase or three-phase service with 1 meter at the secondary voltage available from the electric distribution system at the customer's location. So essentially, it is a city department and has been for a long time. It was inadvertently left off, maybe. I'm not sure, but do you have to have an actual rate hearing to change that?
No, it's setting the municipal city service rates. And it's saying all kilowatt hours during the month for these entities are no charge.
No, I see you have that listed in that box of these entities, but right above it, it says, by definition, applicable to all city departments.
The municipal city service rate is applicable to all city departments, whether it's 0, whether it's the 9.5 cents, or
Right,
whether
so-
it's the 9.7 cents.
So there's no, that's a department that should have been in that first box. Applicable to all city departments.
In Richmond House.
So there's no change.
All city departments are included in one of these three rates.
Right.
No charge, 9.6 cents, and 9 cents. None more listed. So we're moving the tourism bureau from the 9.6 cents to the.
Because you got the library down there. It's a separate one. Okay. All right, that makes sense. Thanks.
So does it need to be in a public hearing to make that change? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Based on the discussion I just heard, yes.
Okay. So, do we establish a date today?
I think what we'll do is plan on having that at the very beginning of next month's board meeting.
For that to be the date of the hearing?
Yeah.
We've done that before.
Yeah, and that's what's reflected in the schedule. I did put an effective date of August 5th, which would satisfy that 15 to 30 day requirement if we had the public hearing at our July board meeting.
Okay.
The only other suggestion, Paul, is since we're gonna have a special meeting, do you wanna move it up or not?
Well, yeah, I guess we could move up the rate hearing if we were to have that special meeting. I don't know that we have a date on that yet, but that would be an option, and I guess we could pivot on that. We wouldn't necessarily need to set that date tonight, I don't believe.
So that would have to be a meeting that's one day more than a week, 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. 30 days,
Yeah, no less than 15, or,
30 to 15.
No less than 15, no more than 30.
oh, less than 15, okay, so it had to be anywhere from today to 2 weeks from now. No less than 30 or more than 15.
I understand. I was just going to ask a question of, is there a reason why you have to rush it, why you can't just have your rate hearing before your regular meeting?
No.
Because the other way just, to me, strikes that it may be confusing to the public, and if the public wants to come and be at the meeting, it's probably going to be better if you just do it at your regular meeting.
Mhm.
But I'm not telling you legally, I'm just devil's advocate.
Yeah, the only ones I've ever attended were with the regular meeting. And there's no.
Unless there's a timeline crunch, my point would be, since you
Yeah.
haven't set a date on your special meeting, wouldn't it make more sense so that you can publicize it, and
Yeah.
anybody that's watching now or whatever will know that if they want to be heard on that change in the rate, they can come to the regular meeting.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So do we vote on that, or is that just okay, let's do it?
You should vote.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
July 21st at 4.
No, starting at 4 o'clock until
We usually do that at 4, and then it goes straight into the regular meeting.
July what?
July 21st.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I was thinking something else. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item, Paul, is we already did that. Never mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
And next up is Darren's general manager report, please.
Very quickly, number one, fluoride. We have now come to, since we're a little bit long, I hope you don't mind, I will truncate it if that's okay with
That's
you.
fine.
Fluoride is in drinking water. We have come to the completion of our 90-day requirement of advertising and asking people for votes. We have shared with you the email that had all of the addresses, both of the insertions of the emails to you. I've only shared that with the board, not with the city council, but they did give you the authority to vote on that. The final tally is we had 198 submissions to discontinue injecting fluoride and 93 submissions to continue injecting the fluoride. I would leave that to you. I guess we're going to come down here to the unfinished business, but I will leave that to you. It's almost
Tell me those
2 to 1.
numbers again. Okay, 93. I see, I got it.
Yep.
Yep, okay.
So
What is the percentage? Did you?
2 to 1. So 198 to 93. So pretty significant difference there.
67, 33 roughly.
It's about 72% in favor of discontinuing and 28% in favor of continuing to inject fluoride.
The second item we have is, as we've talked about charter, we talk about charter a whole bunch, and we've got things that are coming up on change. What I would like to do is I've shared with you about half of the charter, and then we're going to print the other half of that charter. And as you go through, you can see at 11.1, creation and composition of the board, terms and appointment. We have one that will be coming off, at least has put in his papers to stay. That's Bill Fisher. It's up to the city. They've got that on the agenda for their upcoming meeting tomorrow. 11.2, board members, qualifications, oath not to hold other offices. You guys don't get to hold any other city office while you're sitting on this board. All the other qualifications are such that you would be able to serve as a city councilman. And those are the same, other than you don't have to represent a ward. You represent more than simply one ward. Board members removal. Members of the Board of Public Works may be removed from office by impeachment by resolution of the council adopted by a vote of 5 members of the council, or by resolution adopted by 4 members of the council with the mayor concurring. Number 11.4, fulfilling of vacancies. We've got 60 days if someone leaves for any reason. Officers meeting. The board shall choose one of its members as president, another as vice president, and a third as secretary. It shall hold regular monthly meetings at such time as it may designate by rule. Special meetings may be called by the president or vice president upon such notice to board members as may be prescribed by rule. We hold meetings, they're for the public, all of them are recorded, and we don't do it if there's a majority, we don't hold meetings unless it's been posted. Quorums, procedure when equally divided. Last sentence, this is one of those things where it was enacted, where there were 2 to 2, and it went to the mayor. The mayor shall be called to sit with the board and cast the deciding vote if there is a tie. Powers and duties established. The Board of Public Works shall have the authority to construct, manage, supervise, and control the municipal electric, water systems, and wastewater treatment and collection systems, artificial underground stormwater collection systems, and any future additions and improvements thereto, and of any other public facilities which the city of Hannibal may hereafter construct or otherwise operate, own, or acquire. The board shall have the exclusive power and the duty to establish rates and provide for the assessment and collection of charges for municipal electric, water, or sanitary sewer system or other utilities, or the product or services of any other plant or works of the city which the board may have under its supervision, control, or operation. The board shall have additional powers, duties, and functions as may be conferred upon it by ordinance. All changes in rates, fees, or charges levied by the Board of Public Works shall be preceded by a public hearing no longer than 30 days or less than 15 days prior to the rate, charge, or fee change. No fee, charge, or surcharge generating money for the general revenue fund of the city of Hannibal may be levied by the Board of Public Works unless authorized by ordinance. Any such fee, charge, or surcharge cannot exceed the rate of 5.5% of the charges for water, electric power, electric lights, and power services or other municipal services which the board may have under its supervision, control, and operation without the favorable vote of the majority of the qualified electors in the city election. That is the first 7 chapters of it. It's not a long read. The other is 11.8 to 11.14. I'll share that with you next month. James, with those first 7 chapters, is there anything that we're out of line on?
What do you mean by that?
How's that? Here's the bus. Go for it.
I'm not aware that you all are doing anything outside the parameters of the charter, as I have said to you many, many times. This board has a fiduciary obligation to the city. The city is the owner of this utility. You guys are the managers of the utility, and you are to run this utility with an eye to your fiduciary obligation to the city. The city council is who the voters have elected to run the city for them. So you guys have got a fiduciary obligation to the council. I do not see anything that you all are doing that is a violation of the charter, but my only caution is, and this is just from a practical standpoint, as we've talked about before, if the council doesn't believe that you're honoring your fiduciary obligations, I think they've got the right to remove the board, and I've seen them do it. I've also seen once before, and this has been almost 20 years ago, that a council got upset with the board and started talking about trying to sell the utility to Ameren and American Water and et cetera, bust up our utility. I think that would be a horrible, horrible idea. I think the best thing we can do is have our own utility. I think it protects the people. I think it's a good thing for the people that we have our own utility. And while we have this stress and strife back and forth sometimes, and people get upset with each other, et cetera, I think it's part of the process, and I think it's a good thing, although not always pleasant for all of us. So,
Darren, what did you just read, actually?
That was the first 7 chapters of the charter.
Ironically, there's several after what you just read.
Yes, that's correct. 8 through 14 after. That's correct. And next month I'm going to read those too.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and read those right now because it's in regards to what you were just saying, because it specifically says in 11:10, the council shall be given prior notice of any change in the rates of compensation of substantial number of employees of the Board of Public Works. All records of the Board of Public Works shall be open to the council, city manager, and to the public. The board from time to time shall make reports to the city manager and council of its business and transactions, and shall furnish such additional information as may be required by the council. The accounts of the board shall be audited annually by a public accountant selected by the council. There's several things that I have given to you guys, several things that have been highlighted that, again, you guys took an oath just like us. It is your job to uphold our charter. And so by not doing some of these, you're deliberately disobeying the oath that you guys took.
And I would simply say we are doing those things.
I'm not done, Darren. By no means am I trying to say you guys need to read this right now, but I highly suggest reading some of this tonight. And again, that's why I brought it, because I was not sure what you guys were or weren't aware of.
Okay, Darren, you're in your general manager report. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I do not.
Okay.
I'm done.
Moving right along, Mr. Munslinger, can you help us with operations?
As you can see here on the electrical report, first page, we've had a number of squirrel outages. This is something we see this time of year with the young squirrels running around. They find themselves in places they shouldn't be, and they ultimately pay the consequence of that, and it results in a power outage. We have had an effort over the past year to install cover-up or squirrel guards, animal guards. What we found with some of the newer ones that we've installed is birds like to try to build a nest up in them. And so they'll stick their head up in there and ultimately cause a power outage as well. As John would know, there at the property you manage, we've had several power outages due to birds there, and we're taking some additional steps to reduce those.
And that was from them trying to get around the squirrel guards.
Yep. So,
okay.
Never said they were smart animals.
Ultimately, our liability percentage is still at 99.994%. We did have some storm outages as well there around the 19th. Big thing on the mechanics and the electrician side of things, as Paul alluded to earlier, we were replacing the oxygen generator compressors there at the wastewater plant. They failed approximately a year ago, and we've been running on a rental unit since then. I think I reported at the last board meeting that we had attempted to do the startup that week, or we'd completed the startup on number 1 at that time. I just got a call from Lance at the beginning of this meeting, and we did start up number 2 today. So they're fully redundant. As in the past, it required both compressors to be online to get the full capacity. And so that is something that we're looking forward to taking advantage of into the future. The compressors that were replaced were installed in 2012. If you look at page 2 of my report, you'll see our water production number is up. We produced just a little over 113 million gallons over the month of May. Our water daily production numbers were also up as well. One thing we did do is we completed a GAC change out on vessels 5 and 6 that occurred on May 13th and 14th, and we completed our semi-annual basin cleaning. Again, that's where we started the intake located in the river, take it down, hose out all the mud, and then we work our way through the different basins through the plant. It takes 2 to 3 weeks, just depending on other workloads and emergencies that come up. And then again, the amount of mud that we're washing back to the river depends on how dirty the river was of that raw water we were bringing in. If it was a big flood event leading up into it, we would wash a couple feet of mud out of the pre-sedimentation basin. But river was rather low this year, and so we didn't have that mud loading there. Water distribution, again, we're focusing on water loss. We're using that portable meter that we purchased back in February and trying to understand the nuances of it and comparing what we see going through essentially a master meter compared to the individual customer meters, and that's something that we're learning. We moved that to Zone 3, and the crews have been working through that. So far, we haven't found a big smoking gun, but that's something we're continuing to work on. We did replace about 450 feet of about 450 feet of water main with a new 6-inch water main down here on Owens Avenue. That is an area that had caused us a lot of problems. We had a lot of breaks on that line, and so we've made some changes there, and it allowed us to install a new main, and we did that with our crews and got that up and going. Again, compressors went online at the wastewater plant. Sewer collection wise, we've been focusing on the hot list. That's where we go out and clean our troubled areas a couple times a year proactively, and that has reduced the number of stop-ups that we've seen in those areas. One thing that the supervisor of that department is wanting to do, Alex, is wanting to go out and next spring do root chemical kill on the roots. You do that in the spring when the trees are all wanting to grow, and so they're taking up all the nutrients, and any roots that stick down, they'll take up that chemical, and it'll kill the roots within that pipe, and then you can come through and clean it and hopefully prevent any blockages. The one blockage we did have this past month was a roots related blockage. We've also been addressing issues ahead of street paving. We've been working with Andy to get a list of that. We've also recently have went and done Mr. Manhole on areas that have been paved. All said and done this year, I think we're looking somewhere in the 90 to 100 manholes is what we're anticipating having to raise due to the street repaving. And then technology related, again, we're preparing for the year-end process. We're looking to transition our customer information system to a web-based platform. We're continuing to upgrade our security with a new appliance we've got installed there and update our GIS. And then one thing Matthew did see with our AMI system is the components. They used to be about a 40-week lead time, and recently, due to changes within the manufacturer, we're down to about 10. So that's good news on that. Our safety meeting we have on once a month. This past month was respiratory safety and pole top rescue, where actually linemen went up and rescued a dummy off the top of the pole out here in the front of the building. And then you'll see our business office statistics for the past month. If y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to attempt to answer.
Quiz, how much does that dummy weigh?
Don't have a
220
clue.
pounds, something like that?
Don't have a clue.
It's a real life dummy, so they've got to be able to do that.
That's something we do on an annual basis to make sure that our linemen are certified in that.
Okay, do we have any questions? Having heard none, if we could move to projects, please.
Big thing on, I already talked about the water loss. We're continuing to monitor and build that report. Looking for areas that we need to investigate further. Sewer lining will probably occur sometime late July, early August. Again, focusing on the downtown area on the sewer mains larger than 15-inch diameter. We did the 15-inch and smaller diameter mains outside the levee last year. North Street storm sewer. North Street is open back up. There's a few cleanup items that the contractor's working on. This week they're working on finishing the connecting structure up in the old Bridge Approach Park. They've got to go in and actually build a structure or a wall inside the old storm sewer to shut it off from the flow, to direct all the flow into the new storm sewer. They got to install a couple other things. I believe they're going to do some striping on the street this week, and then we'll close that portion of the project out. We'll have a meeting with them, and then we'll continue with phase 2 sometime after the 4th of July. phase 3, it's kind of in a holding pattern with the changes in the requirements from the WRDA program. It started out as a 75% grant, 25% match. Because it's in a low income census tract, it moved to a 90% grant, 10% match. But the problem is that match never changed. That match was all at $3.5 million, and it's now an estimated total of 5.3, I think, is what the total project cost is. And so when we were 75 and 25, we were looking at roughly a $4.6 million project. When we change that, that brings it down to only the city responsible for about $400,000, and so it dropped that total project available funds down to a little under $4 million. And so they're going through working with the U.S. legislature on trying to get additional funds, and the new WRDA coming out this fall, and then we'll make a decision on how to move forward with that. Bear Creek Dam spillway improvements, again, that's a ARPA funded project. Contractor completed all the paperwork. We had a meeting with him during May. He's been out to the site and done some preliminary work to dry some areas up that were holding some water that shouldn't be. And then his plan is to get in here later this month. Granted, we've had a lot of rain in the last few weeks that have prevented him from getting out there and doing anything further. But he said he estimated it'd take him roughly a month to get it completed once he's on site and moving. That's weather permitting. Again, we're moving about 60,000 cubic yards of dirt and reshaping that outfall structure. And then any amounts, substation replacement, the contractor's working on getting materials completed. We are having to wait until about the 15th of July to get some of the key components on the inside of the structure delivered. Those items were ordered last October, and so once they get those completed, the line crew didn't make the necessary changes to our 13.8 and 34.5 systems in that area are scheduled to be here about the same time, and so we're hoping to get this project online sometime. We're probably looking late September. So, I mean, that project has been in the works since 2016, 2017. So I'd be glad to see that come to fruition. So and that replaces the original substation that was built in the mid-70s. So.
Okay, any questions of Matt? Nope. Don't have any. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we can talk about the fluoride injection under unfinished business.
Yep, there it is. We have 70+% of the vote says they would like it taken to discontinue injection. 27% roughly says they would like us to continue injecting. I leave that to you. We've met all of our requirements. If you were to take a vote and give us direction on what to do, we will do that.
We need a motion for that? Or we just need a vote? I'll make a motion to remove it.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We'll move as quickly as we can.
Go ahead.
What time frame is?
We will do it according to the state rules. Go ahead, Matt.
There will be some things we'll have to go through and notify the state of. My only concern is if we discontinue feeding it without utilizing the rest of our inventory, we're stuck having to pay hazardous disposal fees to get rid of it because
So
of the
how
volume.
much supply do we have?
I think we have several months of it. I mean, we buy it at one semi-load or a partial semi-load at a time because we get the bulk discount on it. We order it about once a year, and
So 6 months, do you think?
it'd be less than 6 months is what I was told.
So, I mean, instead of taking a loss and
Paying the
having to
fee.
pay a hazardous material fee, I think we should probably use it up and then be done after that.
Okay.
As long as that's the direction of the board, we'll do that.
Yeah.
What is this?
Do we need a motion on that, James?
Like as soon as it's voted on by the state, like.
I mean, they can set whatever. This isn't a state state issue. This is a local issue.
Right. but
And
I'm
so they
saying,
can
like,
set the parameters on when they want to discontinue the use.
Well, obviously, the city had already voted to remove this, but per state law, I think it has to be
No,
90
they voted
days.
to,
They voted to
turn it
send it
over
to
to
us.
them to look at discontinuing the use. And that's what we're doing here.
James, could you?
Sure. When it was put into effect back in like, what was it, 40s or 50s? Yeah, back in when it was put into effect back in the 50s, the council voted to recommend to the board to take a look at it and do it if they thought it was appropriate. And so because it had been put into effect that way, I drafted the ordinance or resolution the exact same way. So what the council actually voted to was to recommend that the board do it if they deemed it appropriate, which is why they did the vote and all that. So the state law reference that they're talking about is, I think it's DNR. It's a DNR reg that actually puts it in that you can't just shut it off. You've got to do a
90
process, a 90-day process, and blah blah blah. So it's well within the board's purview to go, okay, let's use up all the supplies, et cetera, et cetera. And also it probably makes sense in that we don't want to have to be on the hook for hazardous waste or be responsible for and I know you're like, then why are we putting it in the water? Well, the answer is
It's the quantity.
It's the quantity, exactly. So, you know, I think it's all within the board's purview to do it this way, and I think it's an appropriate way to close this out. And again, it's within their discretion whether to do it or not. And because the council did direct them, we would like you to investigate doing this.
Matt, this might be a stupid question, but there's no way to, or is it legal for us to sell it to another utility or?
You run into transportation issues because it's
I just didn't
in
know,
those
so we're not at a
quantities.
loss on that money
Yeah,
for
and
the product.
It's
and
also
then you run the
contamination
risk
issue.
of contamination. I
Okay.
mean, somebody else that purchases it, if they purchase it from a supplier, there's a chain of custody of it.
Gotcha.
Certain certifications or guarantees that are implied.
Okay.
With it being on our premises, they can't guarantee what's in it.
Right, okay,
So-
that makes sense.
Matt, is it possible for you in the next couple of days to kind of take a look at it and kind of just ballpark average and let the council know so we can tell the citizens, hey, you brought it to us, we took it to the board ultimately approved after the 90-day period, they're gonna remove it, but because of these contributing factors, it's not gonna take effect until potentially, August 1st or whatever. So that way we have a hard number to tell the citizens.
Well, do we have enough supply for 90 days?
We don't know. Let us take a look at what the
Okay.
volume
We've already
is.
done the 90-day notification.
Oh, okay, that's what I was gonna
This
say.
is the end of
Okay.
the 90-day notification.
Okay.
This is just what we have.
This
left over.
is just run out on product.
Okay.
Again, we
Well, I was
purchase it
just
about
thinking
once
if
a
we had
year.
90-day notification, that might be enough to use it up anyway. but
I mean, we
we've
still
already
have to
done
go
that.
through some processes
Okay.
with the
Some
MDNR.
paperwork and things.
And so that's gonna eat up a little bit of the time, but yeah, we can look into what we have left and what we
Will
can.
it save money by not having to purchase this anymore?
Well,
We're purchasing $10,000 a year on a chemical budget that is,
Are you talking about the fluoride?
Yeah.
Well, shit, there's the $10,000 we're looking for. I'm
But-
just saying.
it won't even pay for the
$2,000
cost
shy,
of
I'm just
increasing
saying.
chemicals.
Just trying to calm down, I think.
You can't spend water funds for electric.
I know.
But,
Unfortunately.
so we'll move forward with that. We'll report back to you all on what inventory we have left and go from there.
Should we,
Do we need a motion that?
I don't know.
James, do we need anything else?
I think you've got the vote that you need.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll move forward.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Oh, new business.
Final, I'm gonna go quick again. On a weekly basis, we have a staff meeting. We take those minutes. I believe we've been sharing those with you. We share those with the city. We also have a weekly staff meeting with the city. I get to go to that. I take my notes and I share that with our staff and we coordinate. We also have a monthly coordination meeting, both between the city, ourselves, HREDC. We have that communication that's going on. My recommendation is, would you consider, and this I'm putting on you as the board, a quarterly report to the city council where myself and one of you, that we can go down to City Hall at the city council meeting and you can give a brief, long, whatever report you want or they would like to have from us as to what we're doing.
This isn't something we've been doing.
No, it is not.
I didn't think so.
This is a new thought and proposal. This is one that, as April went through, has looked at the other end of the charter. There is one point in there where we report to them. No, while I think with these monthlies and those things that we are doing with our open meetings, that we're getting that communication, but that might be another one of those
I think
olive branch or something.
I think for good transparency, I think that's a good start.
Okay.
And I think we can go forward from there.
Okay. We don't have I would not ask for any kind of a vote or anything like that, but know that we'll work through John and see how we want to start that and begin.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be also worthwhile getting input from the city council to see what kind of forum they would want if it's as a part of the regular meeting.
I think it's also good faith, maybe it'll be more of them working with us working with them. So you kind of show a little joint effort to the public as well. So that might be something.
And having an open meeting that people can YouTube and listen to it would be worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Which might generate more questions to you guys. Yikes. Let's figure out a good timing. Quarterly sounds great. Maybe it's every 2 months or whatever. Whatever would make most sense for everybody. I think that's a good idea. Needing a vote or anything? Going right to the comments of the city attorney.
Well, in light of the time, I'm going to keep my comments to 45 minutes or less. I have nothing.
Okay. Any general discussion before we go into closed session? Having heard none, I'd make a motion that we go into closed session.
Second.
Under section 610.0211312 of Missouri Sunshine Law shall convene closed session to discuss litigation, personnel, and contracts to include board members Darren Gordon, Matt Munslinger, Paul Trenhill, Courtney Harris, and James Lemon. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're in closed session.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, hang on a second. Make a motion to adjourn.